Hey man, how are you? So we're gonna have, if you're interested, Ali and I are gonna have you on the Secular Jihadist podcast as a guest. Can you, by the way, you don't use the Patreon group for this. We'll just bring you on the podcast so you can mention all the issues you want to discuss with all our audiences on the podcast itself. So you need to turn the group as to because I don't think a lot of people in the group want to have that type of discussion there. So instead of that, we'll just have that discussion on the podcast itself, if that's okay.
Keep that in mind.
Okay, so we're broadcasting live.
All right, so we are. Hold on, let me just check. I want to make sure that we're live on YouTube. It will take a few seconds
to show up on YouTube, but I see Susanna is here. Susanna saying, "Hey boys." I see Mars here. Mars is saying, Susanna just assuming our gender every time. Omaya told me that she told me I could call her Mia.
Hold on.
Ali, I'm hearing echo. I'm hearing.
I know. Echo. I'm muting it. Hold on. Give me a second. There we go. That was a point. Okay, there we go.
Is that what she said? I can't pronounce her name, so she said Mia. Is that so? I'm gonna call her Mia from now on. Anne is here. Yay! Josh is here as well.
I'm not seeing any comments on the live comments section.
Oh, you have to go to. Oh, you are.
I'm seeing
I'm seeing a lot. Just hit the live comments. Are you on private chat or live comments?
Live comments. Oh, okay. It updated just now.
Okay, great.
Okay, good.
That was a delay there.
Guys, how's our idea? Everything good? Oh, Lewis is here. Azad is here. James is here. James. Okay, great, fantastic. Everything's good.
All right, working. How are we doing? Are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go. Start.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Yeah. So, yeah. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Secular Jihadist for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi, and with me is Armin Navabi, the atheist icon who is the founder of Atheist Republic, the largest online platform in the world for atheists with over 2 million members, and the author of Why There Is No God. And for those of you who are watching this on video, he's completely screwed up his haircut, or so he thinks. I don't think.
No, I fixed it a little bit, but look at this mess here. And the back is still a mess. I think I'm just going to cut it all. I don't know. I give up.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
that's your prerogative.
There's an anti-malarial drug called Drama Queen. Well, you've heard of chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine. There's also Drama.
Oh my God. Let's get this.
Okay. Never mind. Okay, guys. So what we have today is we have a guest who was mentioned by a previous guest here, Susanna. Who, by the way, apparently that was one of our best podcast episodes ever.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I'm hearing that from a lot of people. But in any case,
I'm hearing one of you guys is scratching their microphone or something. Or if I forget, Ali, it's you. I think it's hitting your hoodie.
I'll hold it up like this.
Yeah, please keep doing that all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Let's see. Be a good workout for my fingers. Oh God, that doesn't sound right. No, I didn't even mean it that way. I didn't even. Anyway, the point is. So Jarin Jove is with us with today. Jarin Jove is a self-described Hindu atheist or Hindu anti-theist who was initially a big fan of organizations such as ex-Muslims of North America and other sort of ex-Muslims, prominent ex-Muslims, but has become increasingly disillusioned by what he feels, and let me know if I'm representing you correctly, is a really dismissive and derogatory approach by ex-Muslims to Hindus by ex-Muslim atheists.
Yeah.
So he has written a 5-part blog post. It's called the five
lenses.
5 lenses that has been very critical of ex-Muslims in general, the ex-Muslim movement, of ex-Muslims in North America, as well as certain hosts of this podcast, Armin Navabi. No names. So we're going to sit here, and we thought it would be good to hear him out. The blog post, I read through all of it, Jarin. It's very well researched. It's very well thought out. You're clearly a fantastic writer. I think that you made your arguments. The only thing is, I have a lot of disagreements with this. So I hope that you don't think of, if someone reads this and says, okay, I disagree with you, I hope you don't think that means they're not listening to you. It just means that they disagree. So let's start off with your story. How did this come about? What led to these blog posts?
Okay, so I first began learning about ex-Muslims of North America when I was researching for my book regarding like Islam and Islamic theology, because I couldn't really find anything concrete. And what I was particularly looking for were ex-Muslims, atheists from a Muslim background, who had critiques of their own, because they had genuine life experience with this religion. And there were so many representations of, say, ex-Hindus, ex-Buddhists, ex-Christians, but I couldn't really find ex-Muslims until I found the YouTube channel of ex-Muslims of North America and began basically devouring their YouTube show or YouTube discussion panels. Especially the lengthy long-term panels. I would just watch those for hours on end. They were so fascinating. But after I had used that as a sort of baseline to research Islam and then self-published my book, while I was still supporting ex-Muslims of North America, I began to notice a depressing amount of anti-Hindu bigotry within a lot of the content that was being expressed. And I don't mean this whole idea of Hindu phobia, which I don't agree with, and I don't mean making fun of Hinduism, the religion. I mean, when I say anti-Hindu bigotry, exactly what ex-Muslims mean when they talk about anti-Muslim bigotry.
Give an example.
Okay, so when I saw the recent the New Delhi, and I apologize, I'm more articulate in writing than I am in speaking. Speaking is fairly new to me. When I saw the New Delhi producer who was criticized by Hindus for bigoted comments, I noticed that ex-Muslims of North America tried to portray it as a free speech issue, even though this woman got fired for not following the ethical guidelines of NPR, for saying that Hindus eat dung and drink cow piss. And most ex-Muslims, especially ex-Muslims of North America, were portraying this as a free speech issue, which it wasn't. This is a private company that was firing this woman for violating ethical guidelines.
And okay, can I actually say something here?
May I finish first?
Okay, but I need to respond to specifically this. Okay.
Okay, right, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I actually agree with you that was racist by the speaker. And I also agree by whoever said the cow dung, whatever, I don't know. Not racist, maybe bigoted. But, and at the same time, I agree with you that it's not a free speech issue when a private company fires somebody because of them not following the guidelines. But I don't agree that the person that is arguing that this is a free speech issue, that they are being bigoted. Even though I disagree with them, that it is like they might say this is a free speech issue. I might say, no, this is not a free speech issue. This is a private company firing somebody because of them not following their guidelines, which is not a free speech violation. The person that is disagreeing with me on this and think that is arguing for the position that this is a free speech issue, they themselves are not being bigoted.
I would disagree, because that in and of itself, the anti-Hindu bigotry, would be a normalization of that anti-Hindu bigotry if they're going to say, well, this insult is a free speech issue and she shouldn't have been fired, even though she very clearly crossed ethical guidelines and made a bigoted comment towards a subsection.
But the disagreement is on what makes something free speech or not free speech. The disagreement
was whether she made a bigoted comment that violated ethical guidelines. She did.
No,
Yeah, but they are not disagreeing on that. They're disagreeing on whether she should be fired for that or not, and whether or not this violates free speech or not.
Well, it's like Jarin, it's like Alex Jones, right? So I think Alex Jones is an absolute nut job, and I think half the stuff he says is insane. Well, almost all of the stuff he says is insane. But when he got thrown off of Twitter, I didn't really agree with that. First of all, I found it very entertaining that he was on Twitter. I go to Twitter mainly for entertainment.
Ali, Mike, touching hoodie.
Sorry. Oh yeah, tell me more, Mike. Touching hoodie. So so I think it wasn't that. So I was essentially saying that it's a free speech issue. I would say that about Alex Jones. There are other people who are anti-Muslim bigots who say the same kind of thing about, say, like camel piss, and they rub it. Or people make jokes about Muhammad and Muslims do this, and they believe in a pedophile, and all of these things that they say. I don't think those people should be banned from platforms or fired. I would ideally like not to be fired, but if you are a company, a news organization, and someone says something like that, then it's understandable why they do get fired. But I don't know if this is a specific anti-Hindu bigotry issue. I think that as far as I know, when it comes to XMNA, they probably would have taken the same position if someone had said the same kind of thing about Muslims. They wouldn't have.
Exactly.
We denounced the comment. We don't like what they said. Yeah, this thing about Muslims drinking camel piss. But yeah, we don't think that they should be fired. We need to allow people to be able to express their views about things and let it be out in the open.
Well, I mean, they can express their views. They don't have a right to a job for their views.
I agree with you. We agree with you on that. But the people that disagree with us on this are not being bigoted.
Yeah, no, but Jarin, go on. So you said that they don't have a right to a job, and I agree with you. We don't think that they have a right to a job, but that's a very different issue than being bigoted. The bigotry thing. You know what I mean?
Okay, but at this point, you're saying that defending a bigoted comment is itself not bigoted, but for the people defending that comment,
you're not defending the comment.
You're not defending the comment.
You're defending
the right to say it.
The right for someone to say bigoted stuff.
No, okay, the right to say it is fine, but if they're going to say it and it doesn't live up to the criteria and standards that a private company has set forth, then they deserve to be fired.
We agree with you on that, but you're saying that people who disagree with us are not being bigoted. Just because we disagree with someone, just because we think somebody is wrong, that doesn't mean they're bigoted. Mm-hmm. Their understanding of what violates free speech is different than us. That doesn't mean they're bigoted.
Okay, so what then is the standard for which we criticize someone? I mean, they have a right to free speech, of course, but part of that discourse is criticizing them for harmful views. And if they're espousing bigotry, then obviously they deserve criticism for those harmful views. So I don't understand what your point is here.
Jarin, it's very simple. I don't understand how you're not understanding.
Hold on, Armin. So let me lay out some common ground here. Okay, so as far as we're concerned, if you're saying something like, Hindus do this or Hindus do that, and you're generalizing, or you're saying, well, all Muslims are like this, all Muslims are like that, or Muslims should be profiled, all Muslims should be, that there should be a double standard for them. And if anybody says that about Hindus, I think that that's bigoted, and I think that that's a problem whether it happens for Muslims or Hindus, and I think that XMNA would agree with me on all of that. The problem is when you're bringing in and when you're conflating issues of free speech and whether people have the right to say things that we don't like the Alex Jones example that I gave you.
Okay, but Alex Jones is not a credible source of information.
It doesn't matter. That's not the point that we're making.
But the opinions,
the credibility matters here.
We're talking about the specific.
Yes, but not for the point that we're making.
Yeah, and let me lay out some common ground here.
Do you really think that what I just said meant that I think credibility doesn't matter?
Yeah. And hold on. Let me lay out some common ground. So first of all, I actually I do agree with you about some of the things that you say about Hinduism. I think that Hinduism it's a much older religion. I think that the people practicing Hindus are much more diverse in their ways that they believe and practice than others. I think that there are a lot of Hindu traditions. It can be interpreted in ways that you can get rid of the supernatural stuff. You can sort of get rid of it. You can be the Hindu atheist, you can be a Hindu theist. I get all of that, and I'm comfortable with it. I also think that you're right that in the case of in terms of violence and how dangerous these religions are, I don't think that Hinduism directly is necessarily, it doesn't have this codified immutable thing in a book that tells you that you can do really terrible things to people. So
it's still horseshit. It's still horseshit, though.
So that's where we're coming to. So all of the stuff that you said regarding these things in your post, I'm with you 100%. I don't think all religions are the same, right? Mm-hmm. I've always noticed that difference between Hinduism, and Hinduism also has a potential for evolution. It has a space and it has a capacity where there's potential to have it evolve with the times. So there are a lot of things I appreciate about that, and I think that that's great. Now, where the argument comes down to is that if we're criticizing Hinduism, and we're saying usually what happens is if I make fun of something, or if I criticize any specific Hindu belief, or tie, for example, the caste system to Hinduism, which it is, they are both tied. They're tied to it. The caste system is tied to Hinduism, right? If I do that, then usually what happens is you get this entire group of generally the Hindutva nationalist types, right, who come up and they'll talk about, well, you don't understand Hinduism, why are you criticizing it? And they're completely happy when I'm making all these criticisms about Islam. Completely happy, overjoyed, loving it, devouring all the videos and the books. The moment I'll say, well, this is a problem with the Manu Samriti, this is the issue with it, they'll start becoming super, 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 super defensive, sort of like the regressive.
Manu Smriti gets burned like every year. It's not a religious text in that kind of sense.
So you're saying that, and I will tell you, listen, my youngest brother's ex-wife was Hindu. I mean, there's we've had a lot of Hindu people in our extended family, and I can tell you that there are people who think differently from you about the Manu Samriti. There are many, many Hindus who think differently from you about the Manu Samriti. There are many people who think that the caste system, they'll reject it. Most people here in the West will. Actually, vast majority of Hindus nowadays will. But there are people who actually believe that this is true. There are the cow dung, bathing in cow dung, all of these things. They're becoming increasingly fringe behaviors. I totally acknowledge that. But they're not dissociated from the religion. I mean, a lot of Jewish people eat pork, right?
I wouldn't disagree with you there, but
right.
Manu Smriti in particular is not like considered, say, a divine book. It's more like a codified set of rules for, say, a country or a locale. It's not specifically regarded as the like a divine book, like similar to the Quran. No, it would be more like
in Hinduism. What are the books that are regarded to be divine by most Hindus nowadays?
The fact that you have divine books in Hinduism is already makes it a horseshit ideology. The fact that you even have something. That's why they're all horseshit.
When it comes to the horseshit aspect, all the religions, anything that has something, and this I think you agree with. It's
very interesting. Actually, this is very interesting because you have divine books and you have non-divine books, right? So people are like, when you point to problematic stuff, they're like, oh, that's not divine. And that's interesting because now you're admitting that there's divine, because some other so-called Hindu atheists who are saying that Hinduism is not a problem, they point to the parts that is not supernatural, right? They're like, oh, look, this is completely hasn't anything to do with superstition or supernatural stuff. But then the other people who are trying to defend it, they're like, "Oh, this is not part of the text
Armin,
that is divine."
Could you make your point more concisely, please?
I didn't even stutter. What are you talking about? You didn't even wait five. You didn't even wait 5 seconds for me to finish.
Okay.
Can you wait? Can you it didn't take long at all. Can you be a little bit more patient, please?
Okay, guys.
Can I finish my point?
Let's do one thing. I'm gonna move on to this. What you're talking about, right? You have a passage from your blog post, and this is again the blog post links are at the bottom of this. You guys can check it out. You have said you were talking about dharmic faiths, right? That's about the DHARMA. You said, I've seen ex-MNA share Twitter and Facebook images of ex-Muslim atheists and Muslims getting along. Ex-MNA celebrates Muslims who support ex-Muslims being allowed their viewpoints, while choosing to stay Muslim themselves. It isn't a purely anti-theistic outlook and so on. Okay. So then you say, how is this different from dharmic atheists getting along with dharmic theists? If simply getting along under secularism is the goal, then why do they cast aspersions on Hindu atheists? If mutual respect and compassion between atheists and theists in Islamic civilizations is the goal, then what they've been aspiring to is dharma. Yet still in the 21st century, there are Islamic civilizations, many of which were carved out or of butchered dharmic civilizations, have yet to be able to reach dharma. So can you explain that a little bit? You're talking about ex-Muslims and Muslims getting along. What is the analogy about, like, who has a problem with dharmic atheists getting along with dharmic theists?
Well, I think that judging from how XMNA has behaved regarding Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so forth with their commentary, they seem to just view this as, well, this is all just supernatural bullshit, and we should, get rid of all these religions. But then, in the case of Islam, there seems to still be a special status here, where if it's just Muslims and ex-Muslims getting along, that's fine, that's great for secularism. But with all these other religions, you need to just get rid of them.
So I'm going to Armin, follow.
Let me know when I can respond to this.
Sure. It's all yours after that. I just want to ask, because this is
that's a double standard.
Yeah,
that's not. So you just misunderstand.
That is a clear double standard.
Guys,
it's
hold
so
on.
not.
I'm not done with the full question yet. Okay, so over here in your first post in Atheists, the first post on atheism, the first lens, you quoted an ex-Muslims of North America tweet, and this is what they wrote. They said, most religions have weird superstitions, junk science, unnecessary rituals, and restrictive rules that are only believed and accepted because an almighty God commands it. Imagine removing this God and still choosing to believe in the rest of that nonsense. Hello, Hindu atheists. Now, what is the
Ali, can you first respond to the first tweet before you bring up the second tweet? Like, can we address that? Like, you're adding more stuff and you're not letting me or Jarin actually comment on that.
Jarin, finish up your thing about
Didn't you have a question? Didn't you have a point yourself on that first one before you wanted letting us comment on it?
Yeah, no, I thought that this was related, right? So I was saying that.
No.
Anyway,
that's something you're adding more
let
stuff.
Armin, let Jarin finish his point.
Yeah. Okay, so I saw a question in the live chat by Azad. I would say that my criticism is mainly towards XMNA, but ex-Muslims who agree with their views with like this strict anti-theism would also be applied to.
Can we actually focus on one thing at a time, like that tweet? Like, we're just dancing around.
Okay, all right, Armin. Go ahead, make your point.
The dharmic. No. I was listening to Armin. Just.
Well, can I talk? Do I have the permission to speak right now?
Oh my God, Armin!
Is that okay?
I haven't heard what Jarin was saying. That's what I'm trying to say.
He's telling me to respond to it. I want to.
No, I know, but
Ali, just stop talking. Can I talk now?
Let him just. I just want to hear the end of what you're saying, Jarin. I will, Armin. 2 seconds.
Jarin is Jarin right now wants to hear what I have to say so he can respond to it. So just
Armin, I just want to hear about the dharmic.
Ali, stop. Let me speak. All right. So what you don't understand, Jarin, is the difference between people and ideas. Apparently, this is something that we have been.
I do understand the difference.
No, he already addressed that.
It's very interesting that you keep on telling me not to interrupt you. You keep on telling me not to interrupt you, and it seems like you can't do that yourself. Can I say? Because you address it, but you don't seem to understand it. Right? You could cooperate with people you have disagreements with. I can cooperate with Muslims on things that we agree on, and I still want Islam to end. There is no double standard here. I think Islam should end. I think Islam should have died yesterday, right? And I can still hey, we should cooperate with Muslims who are secular. We should cooperate with Muslims who are for gay rights. We should cooperate with Muslims who are for women's rights. We should cooperate with Muslims who are anti-violence. We should cooperate with Muslims who want FGM to end. All of that, and at the same time, I think Islam should end. Okay, my disagreements with Muslims on the fact that Islam needs to end, that Islam is bullshit, Islam is a violent religion, my disagreement doesn't stop me from cooperating with them on things we agree on. This is not a contradiction. So in the same way, I think I could get along with a lot of Hindus, religious Hindus, not like Hindu atheists or whatever, on things we agree on, and while at the same time being completely anti-Hinduism. You're like, oh, why are we alienating Hindus? Why are we like pushing them aside? I'm not pushing them aside. They're deciding that this is too spicy for them to work with me because of my anti-Hinduism stance. It's their decision to not work with me. Or, for example, Muslims who don't want to work with me because of my anti-Islam views, I'm okay. I'm open to working with them. I'm not shutting the door on them on things we agree on. I could work with Muslim fundamentalists. I could work with Muslim fundamentalists on things we agree on. Okay.
Okay, but
so
Armin,
that's not a contradiction. Go on.
Armin, is your position then secular humanism or just atheism? Because if it's just atheism, then that does not necessarily mean that you agree with, better human rights for all, better rights for so on and so forth. Atheism is just a non-belief. So
I'm an atheist, and I'm also a secular humanist.
Right. Okay. So as far as if you remove the supernatural beliefs, why is it problematic to even label oneself like Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, atheist? Why would that be an issue?
It's not. It depends on what you mean. I haven't decided that it's problematic. Different people mean different things when they say they're an Hindu atheist. Okay,
right.
Just like there's like atheist Jews, right? Atheists, like we could have a agreement or disagreement on whether there's having an agreement or disagreement on whether that's a useful terminology is different from having an agreement or disagreement with people's views based on what like an atheist Jew means to them, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, for me, if somebody says an atheist Jew, I've been to Israel and I've noticed that means different things to different people. For the people that say like, look, I don't believe in all this like Jewish stuff. It seems all stories, and I don't believe in a God. I don't believe in any of these stories. I don't believe in supernatural. I just enjoy the culture. I enjoy the community. That's great. Like, okay, if that's what you mean by an atheist Jew, okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good thing. If by atheist Jew you mean like, okay, I don't believe in this stuff, but I think there's valuable lessons that you could get from Judaism, even though I don't believe in it. No, I don't agree with you at all, right? So
wait, what if they're picking and choosing stuff that would fit in a modern context or modern morals? Is that then a problem?
Yeah, I think so.
Wait, why?
Okay, because I think they are by making the source a problem, a book that is
right. But at that point, they are already acknowledging its mythology.
Yeah, so it's the same thing with people calling themselves believing in the Spinoza God, and then calling themselves, believe in God, even though they don't mean anything the same. They're giving legitimacy and authority to a very problematic source and making it relevant. Can I finish answering you? Like, here's the thing. Like, if you are capable of picking and choosing, that means that you have standards you have a moral code that is independent from the book that you're reading from.
Right.
And by saying the source is the Old Testament, for example, or the Torah, you're giving credit where credit is not due. You know what I mean? The fact that you are able to pick and choose means that you have had a where did you get the ability to pick and choose? Where
Armin,
did that standard came from?
If I may. Okay, yeah, so now I would understand your point if you were talking about if they believe that book was divine, but in this case, they already acknowledge that it's mythology, and they're just taking what they find from the mythology and fitting into their modern context. If they feel it still applies, why is that wrong? If they've already acknowledged that it is not real, that it is not, that the supernatural is not real.
So okay, so if somebody goes out and makes constantly like, okay, this book has more problematic teachings than good teachings, and it should not be used as a source of for anything.
But they're not using it as sources of authority. They're using it as mythology.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If you let me, okay, I'm saying if somebody says like, okay, I like this teaching, but this book is on average way more problematic than helpful, but this specific teaching I see why it's good. If you like really make that clear, yeah, sure, whatever. But we have to tell people that this book did not help me realize that this is a good thing. For example, in Islam, okay, in Islam tells you one good thing is like, oh, take care of orphans, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you think like, okay, that's a good teaching, but did you believe that because it's in the Quran or in the Hadith? Is that why you believe it? You're like, no, I have other sources there are other things that made me realize that this is a good thing. Here are the sources. Here's why I think this is a good thing. I don't give credit to the Quran. I don't give credit to the Hadith. But based on other sources, I think this is a good teaching. And the Quran or the Hadith deserves no originality or no credit for saying this. Then you're like, okay, that's what I say. So of course I agree with that. But if you try at all, like in any point of way to say like, hey, the Quran and the Hadith could be useful guide to life, even though I don't believe in it, then I'm like, no, that's bullshit. Again, when I call something bullshit, I'm not completely dismissing the person, right? Like I'm not alienating them. Disagreements are not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Like I have disagreements with everybody. I have disagreements with myself from yesterday. So it's not like you're like, oh, why are you pushing away?
I understand, but
right, go ahead.
If it's like, I wouldn't say like we should venerate these books, just that a specific idea that someone likes, that they took from a holy book that taught them to be a better person, which they already acknowledge, the book is mythology. They're using it based on, myth. But still they like the teaching from the myth. Why then is that wrong?
Well, I clarified when it's wrong and when it's right.
Yeah, but I mean, how is that different from, say, just using the guidelines from a philosopher who's been denigrated because of their hateful views, except for maybe this one caveat that has nothing to do with their sexism or racism or whatever, but the concept that they created, a person might feel is still a good idea. How is that different?
Great example. So if a philosopher comes to the right conclusion with a faulty methodology, I will still call it out as bullshit, even if it just happened to come up to the right answer, right?
Okay, but
because can I answer? Because what matters to me is the methodology more than the answer. Because good methodologies gives you most of the time good answers, sometimes bad answers. Bad methodologies sometimes give you good answers, but most of the time give you bad answers. So if you use bad methodology and get the few good examples, few good answers that it got as a way to promote the methodology, that's a harmful thing to do. So that's why I think like mythology and divine authority and faith are bad methodologies that sometimes give you good answers, but you shouldn't use those good answers to legitimize the bad methodology. So even if a philosopher said like, oh, this is comes up to a conclusion that I agree with, but with a flawed methodology, I would call it out. Does that make sense?
Armin, that makes sense. But after you acknowledge that it is mythology, you've already established that the methodology was faulty to begin with. You just like one particular story that you think has a good lesson. So I don't understand why that would be wrong.
I said it's not wrong if you point out that the methodology, like you don't like the methodology, this divine authority deserves no credit for coming to this conclusion. I came up to this conclusion for other reasons, and I recognize that this is a good conclusion. But if you make that clear, I'm agreeing with you that if you have made that clear, then it's fine. I do that with I just told you, like, taking care of orphans is the right conclusion, and I recognize that it's the right conclusion.
No, I understand what you mean, but
I'm doing that the same.
If you did come to a conclusion based on a holy book, which you recognize as mythology, then why is that wrong?
I'm just telling you, like, this is my fourth time telling you that I don't think it's wrong if you do that the way that we agree that it's...
Yeah, but it would be, in this context, it would be acknowledging that the mythological book had a good teaching.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I just told you that wrong methodologies can sometimes give you good answers. randomly. Like, it would be a miracle if it would be close to a miracle if you could write a book that long with no good teachings in it. Like, it would it's almost impossible to do that.
Yeah, I've taken actually quotes from Mein Kampf. I remember putting it together. I did this as a joke on I think it was Facebook, where I took all these like Hitler quotes from Mein Kampf that sounded good, like, you know, the strength of a man is what, I don't know, just stuff like that. And I collected them together, and I said that these are the great sayings of Hazrat Ali, the first Imam of Shia Islam, and lots of my Shia family and friends clicked like on it. They really, you know, they appreciated it. They're like, mashallah. And then I had to reveal at the end that no, there were Hitler quotes from Mein Kampf. So yes, you know, you can have good stuff in the problem is the process. Okay, the process is that if you're not using critical thinking, if you're going with revelation and someone said something and you think it's divine, and then you're believing everything they say, and they tend to have a few good things in there, the way that you're getting the delivery of that information, the way that you're receiving that information is flawed, because it's all about who's saying it. So that means if they say something that's terrible or very dangerous, then they're going to fall for that too. So that's the problem with the process. And I think that's also something that Armin is alluding to. But I want to move to something else. I want to talk about like the ex-Muslims, the original thing that you're saying.
Yeah. Okay.
That the general problem with the ex-Muslim issue, and this is, and I know this too. I know Armin agrees with me on this, and so do XMNA, is that especially the atheists from the Hindu religion, right, or Hindu
Dharmic religion, yeah.
So they tend to really, really like everything. If there is a meme about Jesus, if there's a meme about Islam, if there's any kind of critical article about Islam, they will go nuts and they'll share it and they'll be very, very happy about it. Critical thinking, you know, yes, we have to promote secularism, we have to do this, we have to do that. And then the moment you make even the mildest criticism of Hinduism, right? Or if you say, something like, whatever it is. I remember I put up a Modi. Modi did a lecture. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, for those who don't know, he did a lecture for Indian physicians and scientists, and he talked about how Ganesh had the head of an elephant.
Yeah, right? That nonsense. I saw it.
Yeah, and he said that this is proof. This is proof that, you know, in Hinduism, in our tradition, we had surgery and transplantation way, way, way before science discovered it, which is something that Muslims say about a lot of scientific claims in the Quran. Now, a lot of Hindu people know that that's bullshit, right? That's obviously not the case.
Right. It wasn't up to the criteria of, you know, modern scientific standards, but there is a culture of medicine, doctors, and an ancient book of surgery from the Ayurveda that has been uncovered. So it's not
sure,
right.
But that was.
I'm not saying it's up to modern standards, of course, but
right. So we were talking about this Prime Minister of India,
right,
saying stuff like this, right? Talking about genetic engineering in the
that's
as it relates to the anatomy of ancient Hindu mythical gods. Okay, right. So you point this out. You say that this is really unfortunate that this is the president of the world's largest sort of democracy, secular, pluralistic place, and, you know, he's saying this kind of thing to scientists. And there was a flood of people, Hindu atheists, right, coming in talking about, well, you don't really understand Hinduism. You don't. Even people who disagreed with Modi on this, they're just like, they were just so incensed that I switched from criticizing Islam to something about, you know, old Hindu gods and what their issue is. It was the mildest criticism compared to the kind of things that they tolerate that I'd say about Islam or Christianity or any other religion. But that's where ex-Muslims in North America is coming from. In that tweet, when they say that, you know, if you like, when they defend, even if they don't believe in it, they defend the supernatural aspects of Hinduism as somehow superior, which is superior as far as I'm concerned means, is it true or is it not? If it's horseshit, like Armin's saying, then it shouldn't. There's nothing in it of value. There's no need for a middleman. Do you understand what I mean? So I don't think that that's bigotry. Why do you think that those criticisms or bigotry.
Okay, so there was a comment by Shah Rukh Kwazam saying that if you and your friends acknowledge that the book is a myth, it's still harmful because you are preventing others from criticizing. I am not preventing anyone from criticizing Hinduism, and that has never been my position. So that's my response to that comment.
Okay.
So as far as XMNA, now again, I made the distinction between.
Oh, did you freeze? Sorry, Jarin, we lost you.
Okay, so
yeah, there you are.
Am I fine?
Yeah,
Good?
You're fine. Now say what you said
okay,
again.
So I make the distinction between criticizing Hinduism, which I'm not opposed to, and being bigoted towards Hindus, which is what I felt XMNA did with its content, because they were selectively reporting on, say, specific cases which a lot of left-wing sources peddled about there being a pogrom in Delhi regarding Muslims, when it was a riot in which both sides were being violent towards each other. Half the people dead were Hindu. So it wasn't a pogrom, as was told. And I felt that this just sort of cinched it for me, because before this, when they were supporting the anti-CAA protests, which they really had no reason to do.
Why? Why not? But this is, now you're getting into politics. What does that have to do with bigotry? There's a lot of Hindu people.
Bigotry?
How
is it bigotry?
Yeah. Hold on, Jared. A lot of Hindu people don't support the CAA and the. I mean, there's a. We can get into that if you want to, but how is it anti-Hindu bigotry to have problems with political proposals from Narendra Modi, right? That like the CAA, and can you also explain the CAA for people who don't know?
So the CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, fast tracks citizenship for people in religious minorities from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh who are seeking asylum in India because of religious discrimination and violence from Muslim majority countries. You know, the same countries that were carved up by absolutely slaughtering Dharmic civilizations in the past, mind you. So they're giving these people who really need it refuge and citizenship. They consist of Hindus, Parsis, Buddhists, Sikhs, and Christians, all of whom in all of these three countries have been thoroughly discriminated against, often with forced conversions, as they're called, although I call them rape conversions, because it's really just kidnapping a woman, raping her, and forcing her to become a Muslim in a lot of these situations. Usually it's children who are being violated in this way. Typically Hindu or Christian children, but sometimes it can be Sikh and Parsi and whatnot. So
I grew up in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, so I know how non-Muslim minorities are treated in those Muslim majority countries. So I'm with you there. But you have the CAA, right? The Citizenship Amendment that aside from Muslims, you're going to give pretty much everybody who's oppressed by these Muslim majority countries a fast track to citizenship. But it didn't come alone. It came along with the National Registry, where all Indian people were required to submit proof of their citizenship, right? So they were essentially thrown off the citizenship rolls until they could prove it.
The NRC...
and 1 second, let me just finish what I'm saying. Now, everyone's thrown off of it, and then everybody, including Indian citizens, and India, again, is host to the second largest Muslim population in the world, everybody else gets a fast track to citizenship back, except for the Muslims within India. So there are a lot of Muslims who don't have documentation. As you know, people live in villages, people who are illiterate, they don't have birth records. They come in, they're now been living in India for generations, and now they're unable to get citizenship or proclaim citizenships. How is the combination of this? And I'll tell you, it was political brilliance on the part of Modi, and evil brilliance in a way. But how is that not right? Targeting Muslims specifically in a kind of clever way that looks to the world like, hey, listen, we're just trying to protect non-Muslims from persecution, which on its own is a perfectly justifiable act.
Okay, so the NRC has to do with they're concerned with election fraud because they're concerned with people who I'm just reading. Okay, so yeah, they're primarily concerned with election fraud because there's this concern that their national security could be at risk if people who are not Indian citizens are voting in Indian elections, because there were a lot of refugees from Bangladesh who never returned to Bangladesh after the East-West Pakistan War that had occurred, which led to a genocide. From
it did. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so now their primary concern is how their election process is being tampered with in this way, because people with nefarious intent could technically vote in these elections, and they don't really have any citizenship, so they should not be voting in the elections of another person's country. Now, regarding the NRC and CAA as a combo, there are actually two separate bills. The CAA is about refugees who need asylum and who have sought it since, I believe it was 2012. When the legal act is codified, so people all the way to 2012 that are coming into India. As far as the so-called Muslim ban, it does not, in fact, specifically target Muslims. The NRC, in this case, it doesn't specifically target Muslims. It's just asking for proof of citizenship with paperwork. And
Jarin, I'm gonna just dispute that for a second. It does specifically target Muslims. So the NSC alone, or the NRC, sorry, it doesn't alone target Muslims. The CAA alone doesn't target Muslims. But both of these separate bills coming together and being passed in combination, it doesn't do anything but target Muslims. Okay? Now, again,
how does it target Muslims? It does not ban.
I'm explaining it to you. So the CAA itself, noble. You're trying to get like people who are oppressed, minorities oppressed under Muslim majority countries, which we have spoken about here ad nauseum all the time. It's trying to protect them and give them a fast track to citizenship. Fine, very noble. The NRC, we don't want election fraud, so we're trying to get everybody to prove their citizenship somehow. Very noble. Okay, put together, what happens is that in one case, everybody but Muslims are fast tracked to citizenship. Again, individually, okay. And then the NRC, everyone is thrown off citizenship until they can prove their citizenship. And the people who have fast tracked to prove their citizenship and to get to Indian citizenship, get back on the rolls, are all the non-Muslims, everybody but the Muslims. So now the Muslims have to go in India, right, which is the second largest, about 13% of the Indian population has to go, and they have to find all this documentation. Which
it would not be 13%. It would just be that specific area near Bangladesh. All Muslims.
I'm saying Muslims overall, majority. I know this started in Assam. They've began rolling it out. I know, Armin. Give me 1 second. They began rolling it out in Assam, right? But the intention was to roll it out throughout India. Right. And now, so that when they do this in combination, it absolutely targets Muslims. That is why the international media, people all over the world, right, who are, and many of them who aren't really partial to this, including partial to any side, including Hindus, okay, they think that this is a very sneaky, a very evil, and admittedly clever way of the Indian government to do this. Right. So that's the problem. Is I feel like you're missing a big part of the story.
Armin wanted to.
Right. So I just want to get back on the topic at hand, because with regards to this, I understand there's a disagreement, and I'm more on Ali's side than
obviously.
Obviously, because I'm a bigot, right? I'm a Hindu phobe. But do you agree? But can you agree that the disagreement with you cannot is possible, Jarin, that the disagreement with you on this topic is not coming from a bigoted position. Like, let's say you're right and me and Ali are wrong. Okay, pointing the view that Ali just mentioned from Ali, from me, from XMNA, even if they're wrong about it and you're right about it, doesn't mean they're bigots.
So I would disagree with that statement because it's prioritizing Muslim lives over non-Muslim lives.
What?
How? What do you mean?
If you're anti-CAA and you're getting rid of CAA as a bill, then that means you're depriving people, actual refugees who need Islam, of help.
That's not our position, though. What if you don't? What if you're not?
That's the anti-CAA position.
Well, let me say, can I? What if you do? What if you are asking for a bill that is not asking people's religion to see if they can be refugees or not? What if that's what you're asking? What if you're asking for a secular India who doesn't? If people have a legitimate case for being refugees, and if they actually want to help refugees, their religion doesn't matter, or lack of religion doesn't matter. Religion, lack of religion, whatever. If you're coming from Burma and you're a Muslim being attacked, if you're coming from China, if you're a Muslim from China and you're trying to find, you're a Muslim refugee from China, it doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, you're a Hindu, you're a Buddha. If you have a good case for why you're a refugee, you be treated the same as if you're a Hindu or a Buddhist or whatever, or a Parsi person. What if that's what you're asking for?
One question, just to pick up on what Armin said. China is one of India's most populous neighbor and shares a massive border with India. There are refugees that really want to leave China and they'd want to come to India too. And they're arguably, or I would say inarguably, much more oppressed. They're literally in concentration camps. The Uyghur Muslims in China, right? So did the CAA bill also apply to them, or was it?
No, it was just the Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh.
Right. So just
those three countries,
the Muslim majority authoritarian countries, not the other one,
not China.
So yeah, so that itself this is like when people single out Israel, and this is what Muslims do, by the way. They single out Israel for human rights abuses because of what it does in Palestine. Fair. There's a lot of stuff, terrible stuff they're doing to Palestinians. But why single Israel out when almost every one of its neighbors is doing the exact same thing to religious minorities and ethnic minorities in their countries? Right? That's where the anti-Semitism comes in.
Israel is a good example because Israel had this had to do with my blog post a bit. So Israel had a specific ban on Syrian refugees. This doesn't really get acknowledged in the Western media much, but when India says they're just going to fast track certain refugees as a priority, well, that's bigotry.
Refugees,
if it's based on religion, yeah,
it's based on religion, right? It's based on their faith. And the other thing
that's semantics at that point, because the Syrian refugees are Muslim.
It's not. It's very specific. No, it's not. There's a lot of other Muslim refugees that Israel would allow to come in, right? Well, I mean, they're not. When it comes to refugees,
let's not
Syrian is the only. Those are the only ones, and Syrian refugees, a lot of people had problems with because they were coming out in droves. But
we're getting off topic. Yeah. Like, let's say we're wrong. Jarin is right. Do you think me and Ali are bigots? Do you think Ali is a bigot? Because you probably think I'm a bigot. So, but what do you think?
Well, if you're going to argue for human rights, but then go against a bill that helps, say, 90% of refugees coming into a country, just because the 10% aren't also helped, I would say at best that's inconsistent, and at worst it's completely counterintuitive.
Okay. So, but not bigoted. So maybe we're wrong. We're like inconsistent. We're counterintuitive. But are we bigots?
Well, specifically with XMNA, they were not putting equal weight on Hindus being killed in a lot of these violent cases. Even before the CAA protests, there was the case of a Hindu political leader being killed while taking a bike ride. Now, when that was going on...
but can you answer my question? Do you think me or Ali are bigots?
I mean, it would depend on your position on a case-by-case basis.
Based on what you know right now, do you think we're bigoted to anybody at all?
Okay, so I'll help you along.
Hold on, let him answer. Let him answer.
Feel like I'm being put on the spot with this question, but
you kind of are.
You are the guest. What else?
We're not going to hold it against you.
Okay. So I would say a lot of your positions can come off as bigoted, and I mean, even if they're coming from a genuinely good place, that does not necessarily mean that you aren't holding a bigoted view.
Bigotry in the
but does that make? I don't know what that means. Are we bigots then?
That would make you bigots, yes.
Okay. So I want to build on. So I'll tell you what. I'll make this answer a little bit easier for you. When you're talking about like the whole the Hindus being killed in India as well and all of that, I do agree with the general international consensus of the liberal sort of enlightened world that what Narendra Modi is doing, is absolutely horrific to Muslims. I also think that what China is doing to Muslims is horrific.
Wait, what specifically about Narendra Modi's policies is horrific towards Muslims?
Well, so the thing is, I think that the CAA and the NRC in combination, both of those things, that is very, very sinister. Okay, hold on. So you were talking about the pogrom, right? I don't know. Without using specific words like pogrom, I'll grant you that I won't use that word. Okay. But when you're talking about not putting equal weight on Hindus being killed and Muslims being killed, there isn't equal weight on them because the government that is in power is a pro-Hindutva, Hindu nationalist government. Okay, those are the people who have the power, right? The majoritarian government is a Hindu. The minority government, just like all of those Hindus that are oppressed in Saudi Arabia and that are oppressed in Pakistan, right? India was not like that. And I know this. I grew up I've talked about this a lot. The head of India's nuclear program, when they first tested in May 1998, was a Muslim guy. Their cricket team was Muslim. They've had the best actors, the most prominent celebrities over there. Many of them are Muslim. So I know that this was not an issue. People who are Muslims from India talk about it. They love it. My whole family is from India. My mother's from Delhi. My dad is from Allahabad, right? So this is not a matter of that. What we're talking about is recent developments. What's been happening recently, and this is what's shocked a lot of Muslims in India, as well as Hindus in India, is that this current government is on this agenda of Hindu nationalism, right? That is absolutely targeting Muslims, and it's a majoritarian government oppressing a minority. So it's not equal weight. Yes, there are Hindu politicians that got killed. Yes, all of that is condemnable. You have to condemn it. It's terrible. Muslims should not be doing that. I've read stories about Muslims doing terrible things to Hindu girls and Hindu boys and lynchings in the other direction as well. But by far, that is not the pattern, and that wasn't the instigation. Okay, so I do in that sense. Now, I don't agree with you on this politically, and a lot of Hindus want to. Why does that make me a bigot if we have a political disagreement?
Okay, so it would not be the disagreement based on politics, but when you're ignoring the human rights crimes against Hindus, that I would say would be, anti-Hindu bigotry.
I'll tell you about every human right crime against Hindus in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE.
No, right, but it's not specific to Hindus in India who might face violence from, say, a Muslim gang.
Listen. It's not about the Hindus. You're talking about bigotry is against a certain group. That means I'd be against Hindus wherever it was. I'm not talking about Hindus. And I have spoken about this a lot. I've written about this in my book. The treatment of Hindus in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia. I went to medical school in Pakistan. We had a few Hindu students, the way that they were treated. All of these things I have spoken about and I have condemned to the moon because they're absolutely horrific. Now, when the same thing happens in reverse, right? And now I'm defending what I think is terrible treatment of Muslims by India and what the international community generally has a consensus on. They're watching it, just like they did about the genocide in Bangladesh, which everybody agreed was a genocide except for the Pakistanis. That's the position that India is in right now. Right?
A genocide?
Yeah, they're not the genocide part, but the entire world can see what's going on there. except for some of these Hindutva, the BJP supporters.
Do I have the permission to
go ahead, Armin?
I think we have said a couple of times. I don't know why there's an echo, but I think I've said. I don't know if Ali. I think Ali has said it as well, but in different places that, and I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding based on the numbers are that Hindus are the number one victims of Islam by a wide margin. Like when it comes to the victims of Islam.
You mean in Islamic countries or
everywhere, like globally,
okay.
as a whole? If you add up the
likely.
numbers, Hindus are the number one victims of Islam. Okay, so, and I think we have acknowledged that. Like, how many times do we have to say that for us to? And I think also that your standard is impossible to meet, because if no activist can do their work, if the criteria for them to point out a harm at some place is to be hold on, can I say it takes only 4 more seconds, I think. If the standard is that they have to their critique has to be equally completely weighted out based on the harm out there, like nobody can say a negative thing about any harm if they have to just be equally say, like just point at a harm and you're an activist. You don't have to be consistently like pointing out everything for you to, because nobody, like, are you doing that? Like, are you talking about every single harm, every single oppression out there in the world based, like, who's doing that?
I've tried.
Jarin, go ahead.
Okay, so if you're acknowledging that Hindus have been brutalized even in modern times, mostly by Islamic countries, then why would you have a stance against the CAA?
Oh, historically,
and in modern times.
Not in modern times, that's questionable. I think the number one victims of Islam in modern times are Muslims themselves. But
I mean that's kind of a given, though.
But you're talking about Muhammad and Qasim and the people who like invaded India at the time, and I'm
particularly talking about like grooming gangs and I should say forced conversions, which has led to a lot of these Hindus and other people leaving Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh for India, where they don't have to suffer that sort of persecution.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, what I'm trying to say, and again, that is a fact, and that is unfortunate, and it's beyond unfortunate. It's horrific that happens in Pakistan. I saw groups. There was a community called Chanesargot in Karachi. It was a shanty town that we went to that had a huge Hindu population. The way that they were living, the way they were treated was horrific. So again, I agree with you. And the good thing in the past was that in general, Muslims were very happy to be part of India. It wasn't an issue. Currently, recently, with this government, they are moving in the same direction and treating their minorities, like their Muslim minority, they're trying to treat them in the same way that Muslim majority countries treat Hinduism. So in a way, if you want revenge and you want
wait, how are they? Okay, so have you read the third of the lenses, the third lens essay?
I've read all of them. And it's not that I haven't read it, Jarin. It's just that I disagree with it. So I've read a lot of. I know that you wrote a lot about Pakistan there. Mm-hmm. You wrote about comparisons between India and Pakistan, how Pakistan is an absolute failed state that has not been able to keep a democratic government, any civil sort of transition of power or anything like that. I agree with that. I do think that Pakistan's a failed state. I think India has done much, much better. And I would, again, I'm not saying that. That's a completely different conversation. I'm saying that why is India trying now to treat its Muslim minority the way that Pakistan, a failed state, its neighbor, has been treating its own non-Muslim minorities, and why is it emulating?
I don't understand how you can. I don't understand how you can go to that conclusion, because the BJP, in particular, has passed a triple talaq ordinance to outlaw triple talaq, which they successfully did. That is not bigotry against Muslims. That's empowering Muslim women.
That's a good one. That was that thing I agree with. But that's something I agree with.
Okay, and really broad, Jarin. You're bringing up just a triple talaq.
Let me continue. Okay, so they're also trying to pass the Uniform Civil Code, which would make all Indian citizens have, a uniform civil code equal for, all citizens under a civil law. Now, the Indian National Congress Party has been completely opposed to this because they support Sharia courts.
Yeah, and that
which discriminate against Muslim women.
We're outside on this. We agree with.
We don't like.
Okay, so you agree with the BJP on this too?
On this, yes.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a liberal. I'm a liberal leaning guy here in Canada. I don't like the fact that Justin Trudeau goes to mosques where there are women segregated in the back, and he says, "Oh yeah," and to all you women in the back, hello, because he would never tolerate that with any other culture. So there is a blind spot that a lot of these liberal, and we've been talking. I have a whole chapter in my book about the regressive left that applies to the Indian National Congress. But when you're comparing that, you're taking one blind spot that this party has, and it's not perfect, and we hate it. But and then you're taking this entire Hindutva, nationalist, Hindu first, like a CAA and NRC, and everybody prove your citizenship. Like this kind of crap, that overall is a bigger monster. Now, do you want to this better
than one of the arguments from the Hindu charter of the modern Hindutva movement is that they want a separation from the temples with the government because they don't like the government interfering with Hindu temples. They would prefer a separation of temple and state.
It's great.
This is yet again secularism.
Mm-hmm.
Like in all of these positions that the BJP has had, I've seen a consistency with a position similar to Western secularism.
So why are they calling themselves Hindutva? Why are they talking about Hindu nationalism then?
What do you mean? Why
Hindutva is Modi not a Hindu nationalist? Does he not think that Hindu should? Doesn't the BJP have a platform that generally, largely favors politicians and people in their party who believe in Hindu nationalism, that India is a Hindu country
and
first?
Doing demographic engineering as well.
Yeah, they're not. If they're secular,
what
then why
demographic engineering?
Well, forget about hold on. We'll get to that demographic engineering as well, but we'll let Armin explain that. But first of all, just this is BJ. Why do you have if they're so pro-secular and they want separation of temple and state? What is this big fetish for Hindu nationalism?
Just a preservation of their cultural values, really, regarding appreciation for Hindu events, Hindu rites, and Hindu traditions.
What has been the issue? When have Hindu events, have you had?
It's been thoroughly insulted, ridiculed, denigrated by a lot of these Marxist scholars.
That sounds like the Fox News war on Christmas story, that there's a war on Christmas. There is no war on Christmas. There's this stuff has been around. Yes, there's Marxists, everything, but there's also another tradition in India. That tradition is of secular pluralism. It's one of the few places in the entire world where people of such disparate religions have gotten together. There's no international terrorist, jihadist terrorist, Muslim international jihadist terrorist that is from India. There's none. Domestic, yes. There's no international. They've all been from Pakistan. They've been from Nigeria. They've been from Saudi Arabia. Not a single one from India. Not one. Okay. There is a tradition that India has of Indian Muslims being patriotic, Indian Hindus being patriotic, the Christians, the Jains, the Sikhs, everybody has gotten along. There are more Muslims who decided to stay in India than there were that decided to move to Pakistan during partition, right? What about that tradition? And
I don't think that's being impeded at all.
And not only that, but Muslims celebrate. There are Muslim people who celebrate Holi with their neighbors. At least they used to. Right? There are Muslims. There's Hindu people who used to come in and to their Muslim neighbor's place and celebrate Eid. What is this? What is the danger? What is the big threat to Hindu tradition and culture? It's over 80% of the country, right?
Right. Well, a lot of Hindus want a lot of these religious personal laws to just be stamped out for a uniform civil code. And that has created a backlash with a lot of these Marxist leftist professors who want to preserve this idea of religious tolerance so that a lot of these Muslim personal laws can stay in the books.
What is the Uniform Civil Code? Can you explain the details of it?
Guys, we're getting into a lot of politics. Is this what we wanted to like? We wanted to establish whether
to talk about his blog post. So this is one aspect of it.
Yeah,
right?
but the main point was whether arguing for these points is bigoted or not. Like, we don't really want to. I don't know if we want to focus on whose side is right.
No, that's what we're unpacking too. So we're just going to.
There's a bit of an echo, by the way, Ali. So.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I just want to stay on this for a little bit. And then we'll move on.
Just wanted to make sure. Just wanted to make sure if this is the direction.
The direction is, and that's a fair point, Armin. What I want to illustrate to Jarin, what I'm trying to do, and to the audience, is that these are the opinions that I have about this. This is about something that I am Indian by heritage. You know, if you're born in Italy and then you live in the U.S., you're Italian American. My parents are born in India, and then I'm Indian Pakistani. All right, so I am. It's the same thing, and
same thing.
Right. So I think it is. It's a. I
agree with you.
Okay, right.
We're getting off track again.
I know. That's a tangent from the tangent. I just want to kind of show you that when I'm coming from and I'm talking about these arguments, it's not from a position of bigotry. It's a position of disagreement and disappointment in the current government of India, right? And what they're doing with Hindu nationalism, drumming up Hindutvas, which are the people who respond to these profiles and respond to XMNA, and our criticism of the Hindutva mindset and this nationalism that we have to preserve Hindu culture does not seem any different to me than those people who think there's a war on Christmas, that we have to preserve European Judeo-Christian heritage and all of that.
But do you understand
identity politics on the right?
Okay, but do you understand the political goals here? Because what I focus on with my support for the BJP is that their political goals are in the service of secularism. Like my position changed. My position changed because I support secularism for India. I was looking at secular positions and which side of the political aisle held them. It was mostly the current BJP government.
So Jarin, under threat right now in India.
So I would say that people are conflating street violence, like the cow attacks, with political ideologies and the political parties themselves, which I think people should try to separate, because obviously these politicians aren't the ones going out in the streets attacking people for having cows.
They're inciting it. That's like saying what Trump has absolutely nothing to do with all of the sort of the spike.
Can you give an example of incitement?
Of incitement? Listen, there are BJP politicians, right, who have been actively supported these things about like taking the city and we're not going to have beef in it. We're going to ban it. Anybody who's caught eating beef is going to have this issue, that. Like all of it. How is that not related to the lynchings of people who eat beef? Like this is. Listen, before the BJP, before all of this, secularism was in a very good position. There, Hindu traditions were preserved. Hindu culture was preserved. You had Marxist thinkers and things like that. What's wrong with that? It's a secular democracy, pluralistic democracy. There are people from Hindu backgrounds who were Marxists. There were people from Muslim backgrounds who were Marxists, and they were bringing in another thing into the
Marxists in particular were having a very clear double standard where they would criticize all these other traditions except Islam, and they would repeatedly do this. They would say, especially Hindu culture had something wrong with it. Generally, like arguments about sexism and so forth. But when it came to acknowledging sexism in Islam, they just ignored it.
There's a lot of people who say stupid stuff. I'm not saying I'm pro-Marxist. Like that's not the point. I'm talking about different ideologies coming together. Now, criticizing one of them. Okay, if we're criticizing all of it, like in our case, we're the opposite of that. We constantly criticize Islam. The organization's called Ex-Muslims in North America. This is called the Secular Jihadists. We're atheists. We've written books. We've talked about it all the time. Now, if we're sitting here and we bring out in one instance what we see as the mistreatment of Muslim minorities by a majoritarian government, right, that is drunk on Hindu nationalist sentiment right now, but claims to guide, just like they say the CAA and the NRC are not, they're totally separate things. It's not anti-Muslim at all. They do all of this under the guise of secularism, yet they have a Hindu nationalist fantasy. Like, we're seeing through that and we're criticizing it. How does that make anything bigoted? Why is that bigoted? Why is criticizing? I mean, we forget about criticizing the religion. You and I both agree that criticizing Hinduism is not bigotry.
Well, I would say that from a historical perspective, what we've done here is give an exception of religious tolerance for Islam still, because Pakistan and Bangladesh were carved, well, East Pakistan then, were carved based on an Islamic identity. That's what, a lot of Muslims did. Right. It was an Islamic identity to create an Islamic state out of what could have been a secular republic. So these people willingly chose an Islamic state, over being part of a secular republic. That's their legacy. And that in and of itself is already, a politicized topic. And I think that a lot of ex-Muslims don't really understand, like, when you make that the bedrock of your civilization, and then have all these Muslim immigrants go back to the country that they separated from, or even go to other countries, then the legitimacy of that project is then in question, because the basis was Islam. The basis for that state was Islam. Now, let me finish. Let me finish. Now, from an ethical standpoint, you might say, like, oh, well, we need to accept them. Like, it's not their fault that they're in this mess, because, people from their father, their mother, and their grandparents' generations were at fault. And I understand that point. But my fear is that once this essentially deteriorates as a state, and they try to push back into India or perhaps some other country that's equivalent, then you get a situation where it justifies war.
So you're saying that because, and by the way, that you're saying that this applies to people of Muslim heritage. You're not talking about the Jains and the Sikhs and the Hindus in these countries.
Well,
you're only talking about the Muslims in these countries.
Yeah, the problem is specifically because they carved it based on Islam. That was the foundation.
That was the foundation. Principle. Yeah, that was, and as you correctly pointed out, Muhammad Ali Jinnah himself was he was an agnostic atheist before he reconverted and all of that. Virtually all ex-Muslims from Pakistan agree with you on this point, that nobody's a fan of the way that Pakistan was conceived on the basis of a religion. It's absolutely the most terrible thing you could do. But Ali,
you guys realize that if you want me to just ask your permission to get in, then I could just
Armin,
leave.
I thought you were just going to jump in.
Oh,
you're supposed to.
I don't know
jump
what
in.
to do if I jump in.
There are a few questions that I wanted to answer really quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah, can I just ask, like, if you for this you?
No, I meant in the comments, not.
Yeah, but can I ask?
We're going to get to the patron.
Yeah, we're going to ask a patron question, but can I?
We're going to do that in about 20 minutes.
I just want to say, for the sake of consistency, like, how come do you feel like do you think we're being bigots when we keep pointing out Muslims committing crimes in the name of Islam? Or we attacking Islam? How is it when you call what we're doing bigoted? How is that? Do you think what we're doing against Islam and pointing out there?
So again, my position is not that criticizing violence or so forth is bigoted. It's just that if you pay attention only to one side committing violence and not the other side, your side committing violence, then it is a bigoted position. It comes off as bigotry.
But it's not our side. The Muslim side is not our side.
Right. Well, the left-leaning side, like the Indian National Congress Party.
I'm not left-leaning. I'm liberal, but not left-leaning. I don't know.
Okay, so the Indian National Congress Party side.
None of this is my side. Like,
which when XMNA was supporting.
Like, here's the thing. When I attack Islam more than Christianity. I mean, I haven't pointed out.
Okay, if I may finish my point. Okay. So if you're going to categorically ignore human rights abuses that people who support the INC and perhaps pro-Muslim groups do, then it does come off as a position of bigotry. in the case of India.
Sorry, sometimes I don't know if you're finished or not, so that's why I interrupt, because there's a pause there, so I think you're finished. But you're talking about groups of people like XMNA and us, where 90% of what we do is attack Islam and Muslim crimes in the name of Islam. So, like, I don't understand. Do we have to point every single one of them for us to be able to start taking a jab at like people that commit crimes in the name of Hindu nationalism? Like, this is all we did for a very long time. I don't understand how much more anti-Islam. How much more anti-Islam do we have to get for us to be able to talk about Hindus?
When the Delhi riots were happening, XMNA shared a news article from Scroll.in saying that there were only accusations of gunfire that weren't credible, when in fact more legitimate news sources were stating that a man fired 8 shots at the Delhi police. Now, that was purposefully ignoring an act of violence by anti-CAA protesters.
It's like the Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter thing, right? Like, where the people are like, well, there's actually it's not the black people who are actually firing on the police officers. They're doing that, and they're actually more concerned about the
pure whataboutism. This is whataboutism.
Yeah, it is. It's just one position's in authority. One side is in authority and is a powerful majoritarian power, and the other side is not. You do realize
you're doing whataboutism, don't you?
It's actually bigotry against. It's I think someone's saying is
okay. I think you both are confusing like some majority view as simply being wrong because it's not supporting the minority. Like, what is wrong with nationalism if it supports secular causes?
Wait, we're like ethno-nationalism or just nationalism?
What? Huh?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, you both were saying two different things, so
go ahead.
Ali, what did you say? I didn't hear what
I was saying. Secularism and nationalism, that sort of combination has happened a lot in the 20th century, and we know where that led to.
No, I mean, ethno-nationalism and religious nationalism, or religious nationalism is against secularism, and ethno-nationalism has its own problem, and Hindu nationalism is both. Oh, so you can't. Yeah, it's both. So Hindu nationalism is against secularism, definitely.
Hindu nationalism has been against any sort of ethno-nationalism. If you're talking about ethnicities, they've been trying to support.
No.
Okay, so religious. Let's just say religious nationalism.
Okay, so religious nationalism. Now, they want to create a safe haven country for people who identify as, say, Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and so forth, who suffer discrimination. And they don't feel that this is bigoted because the West already supports Israel's position on this in the case of Jewish people.
I don't agree with, like, who cares about what the West supports? I support Israel, and I'm against Jewish nationalism by Israel.
So you're against the right of return.
I'm against, right now, it made sense when it started, Israel, right? Right now, it doesn't make any sense for Israel to give preferential treatment to any ethnicity. It doesn't make sense right now.
Well,
so I'm against that policy.
Religious people who are Jewish.
I'm against that.
Okay, so you disagree with the right of return.
Well, if it's based on religion, yes.
Okay. Ali, what's your position?
I'm consistent.
Same as pretty much with Armin on that.
Okay.
The thing is, I think what we're getting is you're coming from a certain point of view. You're from a Hindu background.
Mm-hmm.
You're from a Hindu background. Yeah. You are an atheist. Okay, but you still hold on to a lot of the Hindu traditions and everything, and that's fine. My book is called The Atheist Muslim, so yeah. I'm kind of with you on that.
I read your interview on Vox, by the way.
On Vox, thank you.
I'm with both of you on that as well. I'm actually not just okay with taking the culture, getting rid of the belief, like the traditions, not the culture. Mm-hmm. Not only I'm okay with that, I actually support that. I think if more atheists show that you could do the tradition without the nonsensical belief, then more people will actually leave the religion because they feel like it's a lesser sacrifice. Mm-hmm. It will encourage more people to abandon the belief if more people can see that there's a path to abandon the belief without the tradition.
Yeah. And what's most confusing to me about what you wrote is that I agree with you about everything you wrote about Pakistan. I agree with you about all of the invasions of the Muslims and what they did in India. Like, all of that, I agree that a lot of these things are problems. But at the same time, right, I'm seeing this, and you've given up on Hinduism as a religion. You've given up on the belief. But there is this sort of residual nationalist sort of affinity you seem to have, according to this, with Hinduism, that you continuously sort of.
So if
hold on, that you defend the BJP and that you defend a lot of these things, the Hindu nationalism that, frankly, I don't have for Muslim nationalism, that Armin doesn't have for any kind of Iranian thing, or it's.
Oh yeah,
So
we've been
it's
very
strange to
consistent
me
on
that
that. I fight Iranian nationalists too.
Yeah, it seems like a disconnect to me where you're kind of almost all the way there, but when it comes to like that whole, my Hindu roots and what Pakistan's doing, what this country's doing, what the Muslims are doing, it's just, it feels like you lose objectivity there.
And actually,
you know what I mean?
can I just add to this very quickly? And when you think like we're being hypocrites and we're being inconsistent or bigoted, it's very strange because we have been nothing but consistent on this. Like I've been spending more time fighting ethno-nationalists and also Zoroastrian nationalists in Iran more than I fight them again in India. So I use the same argument against the people in my own country of birth. So I should be bigoted against Persians if that's what you think.
So go ahead, say one more thing, and then we're going to go to we're going to talk about your book, and then we'll go to the questions.
My position actually began actually supporting what I thought was secularism with the INC, but their conception of secularism is simply religious tolerance, which means ignoring human rights crimes against Muslim women. It means ignoring human rights crimes against Kashmiri women. It means child marriages get ignored. Triple talaq gets ignored. A lot of these exceptions that are discriminatory against Muslims, in particular, Muslim women.
Absolutely.
But it's not the Sunni Muslim men, right? Okay, so I wanted to support a position of secularism that helped fast track secular values and Enlightenment values for India as a whole. And from what I saw, in terms of policies, and that's all I looked at, policies that passed laws that change the situation for people in their lived experience, not random mobs attacking people down a street corner, because that's transitory as far as I'm concerned. Those things are like clickbait events. I mean, it's of course horrible that human rights crimes such as that happen, but that's gang violence and mob violence. That's not, that gets stymied.
If that the title matches the, it's not clickbait. Like you don't expect.
So, right.
They need to get covered.
Yeah. So that'll get stymied with more economic reforms, more money getting into India as far as becoming an economic powerhouse, and thereby more taxes and more of a police force for the population ratio, which is how I see that specific issue. I see it as a police to population problem. But with secular values in particular, you need a strong nation state that does need a position of nationalism to support its country. Because if you're not loyal to the country, if you're not having soldiers fight and die for the country, you can't really defend secular values. And unfortunately, that's a lived reality that we all live with. That is the position of political science, especially the main theory that the West has proposed and foisted on the world, the realist theory of international relations, since the time of Machiavelli. Still held.
Armin.
Selective secularism is not secularism. Just because
no, I'm not saying. Okay, so the position of selective secularism in this case is opposed by is opposed by Islamic apologetics on the other side, and within the two states that surround India, it's an Islamic state and a communist dictatorship, really. a glorified communist dictatorship. So what we have here is maybe an illiberal democracy at this point, but with a growing and stronger economy. And
wait, you're saying this is an illiberal democracy?
Unfortunately, it would have to be defined as illiberal democracy because free speech is not up to the U.S. standard as we have it.
And that's not good.
Yeah, that's not good.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, good. So you agree on something. Great. But here's the thing, though. I just like.
But it's still a secular republic, right?
Well, I mean, if you have like a Christian government that is removing the like Sharia law, that's not secularism, right? Because
it's okay, but we're not talking about a Christian government. We're talking about. No,
I'm just saying, like, secularism doesn't mean like you can't just point to some unfair religious rulings being removed and making it more fair and be like, oh, look, this is secularism. No, this is like one religion fighting against another religion. It's not an unbiased attack against a religion, right?
There's this. I mean, Armin, Armin, this is for you. Like, what do you think of? This is what I want to know. Because Jarin, what he's saying is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying that in order to have a secular state, you need a strong nationalist component. Okay, and that nationalist component means that you need to have soldiers and an army ready to fight and defend your borders from everywhere else. And that
for emerging countries, yes,
for emerging countries, and that's the only way. Look, I think that you're kind of like every country needs borders. Yes, every country needs. Most countries need some sort of army or military to defend themselves against foreign threats. Now, does that mean that you have to have a nationalist mindset and a nationalist agenda, specifically in a place like India, which is not a a Hindu state? It is not any kind. It's a secular, pluralistic state,
right?
From its founding, from its founders, like they actually said that. Did they have some level of nationalism in them? Yes, but it wasn't a Hindutva nationalism. It wasn't the BJP nationalism. The BJP nationalism is more analogous to the kind of nationalism you have in Pakistan. It is. When you say we're a Hindu nationalist, we want to preserve Hindu traditions, we're going to prioritize that. You're talking about like the Hindus, the Muslims, also attacking Hindus and things like that.
They're being very transparent about all of this. Like, I don't know how anybody could deny this. Like the fact that this is their goal. Like, there's so many quotes from BJP politicians.
It's one thing to talk about secure borders and having a military to defend from foreign threats. It's entirely another to talk about you have to have a nationalist sentiment, like specifically the BJP thing. And that's
depends on what you mean by nationalist. By the way, they could, I might be I might be defending nationalism, and if by nationalism you mean,
if you want to call it civic nationalism,
if by nationalism you mean like you see the point of having borders, you see the point of having an army, you see the point of limiting and like immigration, if that's what you mean by nationalism, okay, nationalism, fine, that's good. If by nationalism you mean like we think like we're superior in any way just because we happen to be born around in this border and we care about these people more than the other people, even though we're not part of the government, if that's what you mean by nationalism, then no, I'm not. So
I don't see how is the BJP say one set of people are more important than others?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying definition of nationalism. So nationalism itself, I could be for it or against it depending on what you mean. But what the BJP is doing is way beyond just nationalism. It's religious and ethno-nationalism. So and again, this is something like, I mean, I could bring you like endless number of BJP politicians that have made it very clear what their agenda is. Like, I'm pretty sure you're familiar.
The Gujarat riots, the CAA and the NRC in combination. This is did you see the John Oliver episode on that?
Oh, they hate that. Oh my God, the Hindus.
No, but the John Oliver episode. Did you see it?
Yeah, I know. I saw it. That was.
No, I was asking Jarin.
No.
I would watch that. I'm going to link to it just so that people have an idea.
John Oliver's comedy. So
yeah. Oh no, he's actually, a lot of these comedians are beyond comedy. I think that Narendra Modi is more of an unintentional comedian than anything John Oliver has ever done. But yeah, what I'm saying is, I'm not talking about.
Huh? Look, can I actually just read this one quote? Yogi Adityanath. How do you pronounce this guy's name?
Yogi Adityanath.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, Yogi Bear, I think. He's saying he says, "I will not stop till I turn Uttar Pradesh and India into a Hindu Rashtra." Right? So that's his quote, right? And this is a BJP politician, pretty important BJP politician, right? So, like, how could he, like, can he not make that more clear?
And let's go with the Hindutva nationalism thing that you're talking about. The founder of it was Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, right? He coined the term Hindutva.
Yep.
Right? He did, right? So you know that. Okay,
Yeah.
so here is what he said.
He was a Hindu atheist.
He was a Hindu atheist. So this is the founder of the term Hindutva, which means Hindu nationalism. And here is a quote that he had about Hitler. He said, "The very fact that Germany or Italy has so wonderfully recovered and grown so powerful as never before at the touch of Nazi or fascist magical wand is enough to prove that those political isms were the most congenial tonics that their health demanded."
Okay, right? So I would also
openly praise Hitler. He openly praised fascism.
I understand what you mean, but that is not the modern Hindutva movement. The modern Hindutva movement supports B.R. Ambedkar as their ideal person, who was, of course, a rival to Gandhi, and very vocal about his arguments against Gandhi and Gandhi's positions on many things. So it is not Savarkar that they're promoting when they speak of Hindutva. They generally promote Ambedkar, the architect of the Indian Constitution, and who himself was a Buddhist atheist, as we know the term today. So I mean, saying, Savarkar, who did have very despicable views at the time, is like the person who is being supported. He's not being supported. A lot of people in India seem to be ashamed of the legacy because of the Gandhi assassination. And, he was accused of being part of it and then let go because evidently he was not. So it's... I do agree that what he said was despicable and horrible, but you can't frame the modern Hindutva movement here in 2020 based on quotes from a person that they don't even identify with or support the positions of.
Sure, but the actions in terms of like their ideas about how their ideas of this particular strain of nationalism are pretty aligned with his. I mean, I'm not saying with Hitler, but I'm not going to compare Modi to that just yet, right? But I mean, it's pretty aligned with.
Not yet. He's making good progress.
He was criticized.
Modi aligned with Hitler, really? Okay, no. What exactly makes Modi similar to Hitler?
Hey, listen, only pre-1940 Hitler, when he hadn't killed anybody.
Yes,
I'm just kidding. No, but Modi, like when it comes to the nationalist mindset and the kind of ideology he's going in, I mean, it's not. This is not about Hitler, right? This is about Savarkar. It completely aligns with his views. And completely about the Hindutva thing, like
how does it align with?
Can we just
views?
make it? Listen, can I just
blind eye towards the Gujarat riots? I mean, that's a very, very famous one.
For the sake of the topic of this video, I just want to point out. I just want to point out. I just want to point out very quickly that we haven't yet shown anything that the examiner has said or done that was bigoted. Like, it's been 1 hour and 40 minutes, and we haven't even touched on anything.
We disagreed on this, and people will be able to read Jarin's blog posts, and they'll be able to see.
Yeah, link would be.
Like Sarah Haider herself said, it's bigoted to be sure, like her position. So she admitted to being a bigot on Twitter against Hindus. Explicitly.
What did she say that was bigoted?
Is that from one of the? Do you have that in one of the screenshots?
What did Sarah Haider said that was bigoted?
She hang on,
read it exactly. Don't.
Yeah, if you could pull that out, that'd be great.
Okay. So she said, bots not necessary. India is a big country, still part of the developing world. Their standards for civil discourse are not like ours. It's very much a, quote, culture of honor. And then in response to someone, she's like, It's condescending to be sure, but I think you would agree that just because India has been pluralistic for longer does not mean the West isn't far more tolerant today.
She did not say it's bigoted.
Wait, can you read it louder and slower? Yeah. Ali, say it. Ali, do you have it in front of you?
I have it in front of me. So she said it's condescending to be sure, but she didn't
bigoted.
Say
Hold on.
She and it's xenophobic.
No, she didn't say it was bigoted. That's what you're saying. So you're not actually reading it accurately. Ali, you read it.
You said that Sarah Haider responded to this when she said that it was a culture. India was largely a culture of honor. Mm-hmm. Then someone here, Atheist Scorpio, replied, "Is that you or?"
No,
it's not. So someone replied and said that it's got a problem. Hindu toys gained a lot of ground, but
no. What she specifically said.
Hold on, Jared. Can you let Ali finish, please?
Yeah. So then she said, Sarah Haider said it's calling it a culture of honor is condescending to be sure. But I think you would agree that just because India has been pluralistic for longer doesn't mean the West isn't far more tolerant today. Also,
go ahead. So
go ahead.
It was not calling it a culture of honor, which I would argue would be wrong. She was saying their standards for civil discourse were inferior,
which is true.
So that's a bigoted statement and xenophobic.
What the hell? A cultural
thing. A bigoted statement to say
saying that an entire country's civil discourse is inferior to yours is not bigoted.
It's not my country that is inferior.
Iran's standards of civil discourse.
We're not talking about Iran. We're talking about Sarah Haider's statement about India.
It's You're not saying bigoted. That it would be
saying an entire country's standard for civil discourse is inferior.
Yeah,
is not bigotry. It's not xenophobia.
No, it would be bigoted if you say there's something inherently wrong with India and that they could never achieve a higher standard of, like, if you say it's inherent within Indians themselves, that makes them not be able to have a
semantics.
Semantics. No, it's not semantics. It makes it completely. How is this semantics?
If you're saying something's a culture of honor, saying something's a culture of honor, Pakistan's a culture of honor. India is very much a culture of honor.
You don't understand.
Hold on.
Hold on, Ali. Jarin, you don't even understand what semantics mean. There are completely two different statements.
No,
there are completely two different statements. If I say there's something within their culture and it's nothing inherent within their biology or genetics that makes them inferior, and if I say no, it is something genetics, you think the difference between these two statements are semantics? They're complete. One of them is bigger than one of them.
Say anything about genetics.
And we agreed with you that the foundation of Pakistan and everything that derived from there, the basic foundation was Islamic, and that has pretty much infected the entire country and its culture and the way that it works, the entire sort of overall that affected the whole country. And based on that, the second, third, fourth generation Muslims should be exempted or should not be included in the people who should be able to immigrate to India. Specifically the Muslims. So like when you're talking about that is a more bigoted statement. That's a much more bigoted statement than saying that a certain society has lower standards for civil discourse.
Let's just be clear. Not only what Sarah said was not bigoted. When Jarin said, hold on, let me see. Jarin said like, "Oh, you guys interrupt me so much during the show," and he very good at not interrupting, and Jarin keeps interrupting me. Okay, so but not only what she said is not bigoted. Jarin also said that she admitted that it was bigotry, and then when we read it, she
said condescending. My mistake.
Okay, so you're not even reporting it accurately.
So I corrected myself. So
thank you for that. But I think we just have a very different idea about what bigoted is. I genuinely think that when you're talking about like, to me, it's what I don't understand is that we're talking about the CAA and the NRC together combined, the way that it's been, the architecture of both of these things coming out at the same time, the way they work together, and that you think is not bigoted at all. But if someone says that there is an honor culture in India and in Pakistan and all these countries, which there is, what is the word in Bollywood movies? You watch Bollywood movies growing up?
Some.
What do they say when someone is raped? What's the term that they use for it in Hindi? When someone is raped, right? What's a term that they use? Izzat lutna. Have you heard that? Uski izzat lutli. Izzat lutli, I stole her honor. The way that rape, right, aside from the technical term like balatkar, it actually means the term that they use, izzat lutla, means to steal their honor. The entire country, India, is an honor society. Sati is a product of honor society.
Yeah.
FGM and all of these other things in Muslim cultures in India, it is. And I know that you also made a comment, you wrote in your blog post about and I completely disagree with this as well, that you compared that the rape epidemic in India, like, well, you know, in the U.S. it's kind of comparable, and you
the U.S. is worse.
So there you go. So you're saying that the rape epidemic in the U.S. is worse than it is in India.
So how is that not bigotry then? You're based on your standard,
if I may.
No, that's not the point about the bigotry.
So I brought this up with
the U.S. Women's rights in the U.S. are, you know, people say women's rights in the U.S. are worse than in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but based on his standard, that's bigotry. Based on his standard,
there's no comparison.
I'm not saying it's bigotry. I'm just saying that why is it that when you say
you're
like
telling me what my standards are and saying that I'm not being consistent?
No, I'm asking a question. How is that?
You're not asking a question. You're
saying, Jarin, go ahead.
Specifically say, how is that not bigotry?
Sorry about that. Go on. Just
okay. So, from my research during my college years, I found out that Native Americans didn't have a right to sue their rapists in U.S. courts up until 2012, when the Violence Against Women's Act was amended in the U.S. This was mainly women in the Native American lands, the Native American reservations. I don't think it applied to Native Americans living within U.S. society itself, but Native American women in reservations did not have a right to sue their rapists in U.S. courts until 2012, because the Indian Civil Rights Act of 1965 said that they could not sue their rapists.
Okay, so that's bad.
That's terrible.
That's terrible.
How is this? You're saying that the rape issue in the
now,
US
my argument there was that India's situation with rape and the problems there lie in the lack of ability for the courts to get to all these claims in a timely fashion. The population to court ratio, there's a huge disparity. Now, in the case of the United States, there's no real disparity. There's no reason why this should happen. There's no problem, causing this, other than a lack of willingness to fix the issue.
What? Okay, can we actually move?
It's not. Oh my God, we have to have an entire episode on this.
Yeah, can we actually move one step back, because we keep jumping around without addressing one topic? Like,
oh my God, I'm so tempted to talk about this right now, but okay.
No, please don't.
So you want me to be in the podcast again for?
Yeah,
sure. Like, seriously?
Let's go to Patreon questions.
Hold on. Standard, like, I want to say this. Like, can you? I'm not saying this is your standard, Jarin, but can you? I'm asking you now a question, okay, just to see what your standards are, okay? I'm going to make a different statement, right? Which is not, you're going to be like, oh, that's different. Yeah, I know it's different. I'm just going to see if you find this bigoted or not, okay? During the golden age of Arabs and Persians, okay, not the golden age of Islam, because it wasn't because of Islam, the golden age of Arabs and Persians, right? During that time, the standard of discourse among Arabs and Persians was higher than what it was in current European countries. Okay, this is what I think. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's right. Okay, this is my understanding of history. At that time, the standards of discourse was higher in Middle East. Okay, is that a bigoted statement?
Well, you're generalizing an entire population.
Yeah, but I wasn't talking. Yeah, I am. I'm talking about averages. I wasn't talking about individuals. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can find individuals in Europe that had higher standards of discourse than somebody in the Middle East. I'm talking about averages. When you're talking about averages, you're allowed to generalize.
Okay, well, then it has nothing to do with similarities to Sarah Hayter's tweet, because she was clearly not talking about averages.
I'm not talking about Sarah Hayter's tweet. I'm talking about what I said, that you said it was bigoted. I said that yes, the standard of discourse in India is below many Western European and North American countries. That's what I said, and you said what I said is bigoted.
It is.
Okay, so what about my second statement regarding to Middle Eastern countries back in the golden age of Arabs and Persians? Is that second one also bigoted?
That's a completely different context.
How is it different?
Because they have different sets of functioning governments and different systems at play. which result in different outcomes. Like religion played a much larger role in controlling people's lives back then than, say, now.
What? Religion didn't make?
Religion played a much larger role back then.
Yeah, but my statement when I said there's a higher, I wasn't talking about religion.
Look, the context here is too different, because we're talking about modern people who are free to think and speak as they like, versus the ancient world where you could be killed for having certain views. So I don't think it's comparable.
Well, I don't know if it's comparable, because what are you talking about? The standards of discourse was different even when it comes to views that were not punishable by death.
Right, but I mean,
even when they're talking about medicine, like there's the standard of discourse in Middle East was higher than Europe, and there's not much you could say about medicine. That
so to understand the difference here, and to better make my point, I once watched Thomas More's Man for All Seasons film, and I did some research on him. Apparently, he killed people for speaking and writing English. That was a crime back then in like the 1400s.
Do you think that explains the difference between Europe and Middle East at that time?
Well, I'm saying that religion played a much larger role than it does now. So a lot of these standards were defined by, well, what can I say and do that won't get me killed by the religious authority in my state?
The differences are mostly because of the wealth of the Persian Empire compared to what Europe was going through at the time. That's what the difference is. Like whatever you say, religion has an influence. Well, whatever the influence is, we're the same species of animals that we are today than we were back then. We're still influenced by external, like some of them are life-threatening, but most of them are not. Most of the things that makes us think certain ways are not life-threatening, okay? That's a very small fraction of the views that were life-threatening. Most of the things, like it could be religion, it could be other sources of influence. It could be the movies that we watch. It could be the podcasts that we listen to. It could be our government. It could be our culture. People were influenced by different sources of.
Okay, but there were public beheadings during that time. I don't think we can really compare.
Again, that's a very limited, even back then. Okay, so for example, back then you had Zakaria Razi come out in the heart of the Islamic Empire and saying that the Quran was fucking horseshit, right? And he never got executed, right?
No, I'm not talking about.
Even in Europe, there was very again, it is way worse than today. But even in Europe, there are 99% of the views out there being expressed would not get you killed. Like more than 99, but there's a very even back then compared to most there. You could have a lot of discussions on many things that wouldn't get you killed, right?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. What do you mean that's not accurate? You could talk about engineering. You could talk about statistics. You could talk about the stars. You could talk about medicine. You could talk about farming. You could talk about none of these things.
And write in a specific language that you were born into. I think that's a pretty big deal.
And
you think that had a okay.
Yes,
but that was almost the same on both sides. The Middle East, in the Middle East, you could get killed saying same things. In Europe, you could get killed saying same things.
We're repeating ourselves now. So I think
you're being consistent with your standards here. You think
all points have been made. We know Jarin's position on this.
Right.
We know Armin's on this. Sohan D'Souza's saying that Sarah hit her about that. She's not calling her tweet condescending. She's calling what atheistic Scorpio responded to. He called the Western thinking of he wrote Bichare Anpar Gawar Log, or these illiterate people. The way that the West thinks about it, that's the part that's actually condescending.
That's
Ali,
I remember.
Ali, can you keep your microphone up, please?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
She began that tweet, isolated from any other comment, so that's not true at all. Because I remember from my screen capping of it.
Let's just point out that Sarah is not here to clarify or defend herself, so we might all be wrong.
No, she is actually responding to atheistic Scorpio and AIDS BC.
Can you show me?
Those guys are. Yeah, it's on your blog. I'm on your blog.
What do you mean? No, I mean, wait. Are you talking about the second tweet or the first? Because I thought you were talking about
the one where she said it's
condescending. It's not necessary. India is a big country, still part of the developing world. The standards for civil discourse are not like ours.
Yeah,
the condescending part.
That was the comment I'm talking about, not the second.
No, but when she says it's condescending, to be sure, right? Yeah. She's responding. It seems like she's responding here at the atheistic score. But anyway, so
she's still referring to India, regardless. But I'm specifically talking about her first comment.
I don't think she's talking about. I think so.
We should have Sarah on and talk about ex-Muslims dealing with Hinduism.
No. In all honesty, I think that she's actually tired of the topic herself. So
I keep wanting to find excuses to invite Sarah. Find those are.
I'm not sure if we would get along.
Those are. No, I mean just with Sarah.
Everybody, there's nobody who doesn't get along with Sarah. Everybody gets it. Okay, guys, let's go to the patron comments. I just said a little bit of a clarification. When you talked about the Native American women are not able to sue their rapists, that's true. There was a legislative loophole that tribal courts can't try non-Native individuals, non-Indian individuals. That means that white people can really commit any kind of crimes against Native Americans. That includes rape with zero repercussions. So that's actually the larger context of it. It wasn't just a specific rape issue. And that's sort of just one example that you're giving about a minority community, but that I don't think that in any way makes the case that the U.S. has a much worse rape problem in India when you look at attrition.
So my argument there is that you're comparing a country that is progressing, into a modern first world country state. It's still not there yet, versus a first world country that
so we agree that it's behind.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. We're talking about economic gains here, not intelligence, as Sarah Hayter was. So
she's your misrepresenting.
Where was it intelligence?
She did not say anything about intelligence, Darren. Come on.
Where was it intelligence?
Okay.
No, there was nothing.
Clearly defined.
Nothing about this. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So I would say it would only become a fair comparison if both their economies were on the same level. Where they
India's behind.
Then you can't compare anything to anything. You can't compare India to Pakistan. You can't compare anything to anything. You're saying that Pakistan has been afflicted, which I agree with you, has been completely corrupted forever, right? Overall, as a society, as a mindset.
Well,
bigoted as you want.
Which is inferior. Because corrupted means inferior culture.
Yeah, because of its Islamic foundation.
Okay, so my position here would be that I do think that secular republics, are within their own standard and context, and not really comparable to other countries with like monarchies or Islamic states that purport to be Islamic republics, but really there's no such thing because there's no.
Every country is comparable to other countries. Every country is comparable to other
countries.
No, but I'm comparing states that are similar.
I understand. That's your criterion.
Yeah,
right? But I'm not. You're also making a comparison between the U.S. and India, and you're saying that the U.S.
They're both secular republics.
They're both secular republics, and you're saying that the rape epidemic in the U.S. is much worse.
Now.
And the first argument you gave for it was this:
the rates are higher in
the Native American loophole, right? Which is it doesn't say anything. We don't know.
It's very funny how
I cited the rates are higher in the U.S.
We're gonna link to it. And by the way, the rape epidemic. I'll tell you something. The rape statistics in Sweden per capita are way worse than any Muslim country. Why?
It's very bizarre to me
because
they're very bizarre.
Islamic.
Armin, one second. Just 1 second. 1 second. The rape statistics in Sweden are way worse than any Muslim majority country. Why is that?
Because there are exceptions in Sharia law in a lot of these Arab countries.
No, there is. It's because rape is much more common in.
Why are we talking about rape statistics?
Hold on. Then Sweden, it's much more common. It's not reported. It's not brought to the courts. It's not even thought of as a crime. No, but that is true for a lot of places where there are honor cultures like India as well.
Okay, I'm going to go back to interrupting because you guys are not being fair when I ask for permission.
Well,
it's really not fair.
So I wanted to comment on Ali's.
Let me just say something because you guys are being unfair. I think it's very bizarre that whenever you point to the faults of one country, like whether it's I don't know, Israel, India, Iran, United States, every time you're like, oh, this is a major problem in this country. Like the number one stupid defenses like, oh, what about the other country? Oh, that other country, this other country. Like, this is like such a obvious use of whataboutism. Like, how does anybody think that's a defense?
I disagree strongly there. I think there is this idea of Western exceptionalism that needs to be challenged, because if the West is not living up to these ideals that they set forth, then I don't understand how they can.
You responded to something I didn't say. You think that
I'm disagreeing with you on that.
No, you're disagreeing with something that I did not say. You're disagreeing with something that when you calling out whataboutism doesn't mean that you think that the other countries shouldn't be called out. When I say that if I attack this country,
I'm not saying the other countries should.
See, you're not letting me. Again, you see, I'm not interrupting. You are. So when I say, like, if I say there's something wrong with B, and you say what about A, and you're like, well, no, I think A should be called out. If I say whataboutism is wrong, that doesn't mean I don't think A shouldn't be called out. How do you even think that these are just like two?
He's talking about the deflectionary tactic, but
if I may, I'm sure not to make any deflectionary tactics in the blog post itself. I acknowledge these.
But you did so here.
I acknowledge these problems, and I pointed out that unlike the INC, the BJP actually made good, say, on the Gujarat riots by convicting the people who had caused them and helping the victims get justice, as I cited in one case in my blog, which doesn't seem to have been the focus on any topic of discussion here.
Well, I'm not talking about what you said here.
But when there's cases where rape victims get justice under the BJP government, thanks to fast-tracking a lot of these court cases, which the INC didn't even really bother to help with, then I don't really know what the heck you're arguing for in terms of human rights.
We have to go
and so forth.
Well, maybe listen.
At best, your positions are inconsistent.
We have to hold on.
What are you talking about? No. I need to respond to that. No. I'm not gonna wait. I'm not gonna wait. I'm not gonna wait. I'm gonna talk. I've been waiting for most of this episode, Ali. You don't get I've been very good at not interrupting.
Armin,
hold on. No, Ali, stop talking.
Okay, quickly.
Yeah. You calling out I'm calling out whataboutism, and then I'm telling you, saying like, no, I think those other countries should be called out. I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. Calling out whataboutism is not the same as saying those other countries shouldn't be called out. And you're like, oh, you're being inconsistent. You don't understand how logical fallacies work. You don't understand that whataboutism.
I don't understand how logical please.
And you don't. And it's again.
Explain how I don't understand how logical fallacies work.
You don't even know.
I'm holding you to that.
It's very. You started.
I don't understand how logical fallacies.
You don't know. You told me not to interrupt. Okay, see, I'm done, because you don't even know how not to interrupt me. You told me that I interrupt you. You don't let me finish, and I've been very, very careful at not interrupting you this episode. Guys, I think I did a good job.
It's not productive for the audience. It's not productive for the audience.
All right, Ali, go.
We're gonna go to patron questions. So I just want to tell you overall the blog post. I think that it's worth reading. I think everybody should read it. There are a lot of genuine criticisms, well thought out criticisms of all of us and everything that we do, even if we don't agree with them. Right. My main criticism of the way that you write about things is generally that the arguments you make, you always find. To me, it feels like you always find the one exception to the rule. Like, for instance, the Muslims who say, hey, well, Saudi Arabia has just as many good rights for women as the U.S. does. A lot of leftists say that. Okay. Or, for example, oh, what about terrorism? What about Christian abortion bombings? What about how they bomb abortion clinics? Look, that's an example. So it's the same as, Muslims committing terrorism. It's not just Muslims who do it. And this is the problem. You're talking about the rape thing. You're just bringing out the Native American example. You're talking about the Gujarat riots, and there's so much more to it. And you're just bringing out this sort of one example of what the BJP did, where they convicted somebody, and you cite a certain case, and it makes it seem bigger than it is. It's not, Jared. It's just
patron questions.
That's where I disagree.
Okay, if you disagree with me on that, what evidence do you have regarding your arguments? Because I've provided the evidence, I've cited the evidence, I've done the research for the evidence. So what is your evidence?
Okay, so I can go.
I'm holding you up to these standards because I don't.
After this, patron question.
I'm glad you are. I think that everybody here, the kind of evidence when we're talking about, it's like saying, what evidence do you have that the Pakistan committed a genocide in Bangladesh in East Pakistan, 1971? The evidence is out there for anybody who wants to look it up. You can even go on Wikipedia Right?
Okay, but do you have any specific cited sources?
I have there are loads of specific cited sources that I'm not going to get into right now because they're widely available. You can go to Wikipedia. You can read about the Gujarat riots. You can read about the antics of the BJP, like sorry, not BJP, but what Narendra Modi did and why he was criticized about it. All of that information is out there for anybody to find.
That's very vague.
It's vague because it's not vague. It's just that there's a mountain of it. When there's mountain,
okay, if there's a mountain of evidence, you can cite it then.
I can't because it's a mountain, and I'd have to say it's like, what is the evidence that you have?
Several examples.
What is the evidence that you have?
As I have.
Can you please cite me the evidence that the Pakistan committed genocide against the Bangladeshis? Can you cite me the evidence that the Holocaust occurred and Hitler killed 6 million Jews? Can you cite me the evidence? What would you say? Would you pull up documents and show it to me on a podcast, or would you say, guys, this is common? It's everybody knows about it. The Gujarat riots or something like that. It's everybody knows that he turned up. I'm not saying that he killed all of those people. Right, so I'm not being unobjective here.
I would cite, Jewish historians that I know, or accredited news sites like Haaretz as far as the Holocaust, because they have plenty of information.
Okay.
I can do that because we do have the information. So if anyone is denying it, you can bring the sources and prove them.
I will cite
the point.
I'll tell you what. I'll put all the links for the Gujarat riots, my position. I'll put it all here in the description. I will cite the New York Times. I'm going to cite the Guardian. I'll cite some of the most prestigious media outlets and investigative reporters out there, and I'll put it in there so you guys everybody can read it.
I mean, the BJP
patron question.
Right, so I don't see
patron question.
Yeah,
there was.
Well, we'll see. We're going to have the citation.
Patron question has been 2 hours.
Azad Mufakir is asking. Okay, we're going to do these. Sorry, guys, we're going to do 15 minutes of these because we're kind of over.
I just wanted to tell the audience that I am more articulate in my blog post than I am in speaking. Like, speaking is new to me. Blog posting is not. So please
make YouTube videos for practice. Make more YouTube videos for practice.
Yeah, you should. And the other thing is, to be fair to Jared, there are two of us, me and Armin, and this is a very passionate topic where we're under criticism. So this has been kind of heated. So I think that if you really want to know about what Jarin is talking about at length and you want to know about his detailed arguments, then do read the blog posts. And again, the links are in the description. So Azad Mufakir, he's got a whole bunch of good questions here. I think, Jarin, can you delineate, are your criticisms for the ex-MNA specifically, or are you covering all ex-Muslims?
I covered that earlier when we hit the 20-minute mark, I think. I did address that question already.
Okay, cool. So, okay, Susanna is saying this is exactly how I thought this episode would go, and I'm loving it. Susanna, you are a sadist. You're a sadist. Well, you know that. Well, it's kind of cool. I like it. All right, hold on. I'm looking for a question.
Matt asked a good question somewhere. Matt, instead of saying us,
he did.
Okay, go.
Oh, okay. No, this is not. It was a rhetorical question. But go ahead.
Can you No, I don't know. He's saying I asked a question at the beginning. Matt, repost it if you want us to read it.
Right. So Azad is also asking, Jarin, in your opinion, what does the ex-MNA and the ex-Muslims, what do they need to do, exact steps, to be at your standard where you would not think that they're anti-Hindu bigots?
Acknowledge human rights crimes against Hindus in India.
So you know that they do acknowledge human rights crimes against Hindus
in other countries, yes,
but in Muslim majority countries. So Muslim majority countries clamping down on Hindus.
Yeah, and I would like to point out that you acknowledge human rights crimes in these countries, but then you go against. They support. I'm talking about ex-MNA in particular. Then they go and support anti-CAA protests. That is at best inconsistent.
Okay, well, we already went over this, so I won't get into it again. But I don't think you can call it anti-Hindu bigotry.
I have a question.
They are standing up for Hindus everywhere in the world, except for the majoritarian Hindu.
Well, if they're not
majority in India
who need Islam, then I don't.
They are absolutely supporting the refugees.
They are not supporting them if they support the anti-Islam.
No. They. You're wrong, Jared. You're actually objectively wrong about that.
I'm not objectively wrong.
No, they are.
But we already pointed this out.
Not this part. they are supporting all of the refugees. They think that all of them should be able to get asylum as anywhere in the world. They're opposing the singling out of Muslims who are persecuted, for example, in China and other places too, even in Muslim majority countries, who are exempted from this. Okay. Armin highlighted his own comment. It's great.
Because it was a response to Shah. No, but Jarin, I'm not saying you have or you haven't, but have you called out the bigotry against Muslims in China?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. Shah asked me a question. I would just really want to quickly answer. Shah is asking me, Armin, do you think Jarin's positions are bigoted against Muslims? I don't think Jarin is bigoted against anybody. Yeah, I disagree with him, but I don't think he's a bigot in any way.
I agree with that. I don't think so. Okay, so Sohan has a very good question. He's saying, "Great, can we have beef burgers now?" Okay, I'm just kidding. Are you a vegetarian or do you eat?
No, I'm not a vegetarian. Atheist? Huh? I'm not a vegetarian at all.
Okay, cool. Sohan is also saying, okay, so I don't know. This is a little obscure.
Can we have serious questions? Because if Sohan's just making jokes, then
he's not. He's saying, is the BJP also planning on getting rid of IPC 295A? What is that?
Oh, okay. So that's a banning criticism of a religion, essentially, because the religious community doesn't feel comfortable with that. It was made during the British era after Russell Ranga was made. It was a
blasphemy law.
Yeah, it's a blasphemy law imposed by Britain because there was I believe it was a book, it might have been a comic, where Hindus made fun of Muhammad for having so many sex slaves and so forth, and said, him and his wives, he clearly has like a heavy sexual prowess. And basically what happened was the publisher had to go into court due to a lot of Muslim protests regarding that specific book, Russell Ranga, and he was killed by an Islamist in British courts after I believe he was ruled against by the British courts at the time. I believe it was 1920. I forget the exact date. I'm sorry, but it's very famous in India as a case. And after he was killed, Muslim protesters protested even more fiercely, and they put in that law to support the Muslim community so that their religion was not going to be criticized by the free speech that existed before then. After the Russell Ranga publisher was killed in court.
So the question is the BJP going to get rid of it?
To the best of my understanding, I don't know too much about this particular issue. I certainly hope that they do, but to the best of my understanding, they're waiting until the police to population ratio is stronger before they can start getting rid of those laws, because otherwise it's going to be a firestorm of violence due to religious sentiments by specific communities.
Okay. That's,
yeah.
Now, if Azad is asking, so if speaking against BJP policy, right, is bigoted, like the CAA.
I never said that.
You're talking about the anti-CAA protests, okay, right? So yeah, that kind of policy. Is speaking against Saudi policy also bigoted?
I don't understand the question. What are they trying to say?
Yeah, okay. I think that you kind of answered it already. You're saying that you think that there's certain aspects of the BJP policy when the anti-CAA protests, when you side with those, that's a bigoted position.
Okay, so for example, I would also like to clarify. Like I brought up a behavior by Yogi Adityanath, which was bigoted, where he posted the pictures of people who were accused of being part of riots on a wall, on a very public wall in Uttar Pradesh, and the Supreme Court of India said, this was unconstitutional and they needed to remove it. Now, I support the Supreme Court of India in that position, and what that man did in an effort to shame people was wrong. And it's wrong from the perspective of civil law and secularism.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I see there is the checks and balances system working out, so that even if the BJP has a lot of these extraneous issues, then the Supreme Court of India knocks it out anyway. So if a checks and balances system, is consistent and stays consistent with supporting secular values, then overall, in terms of consequences, the effort is the same. The result, I should say, is the same.
Okay. Matt Rose had a question. This is the first one. I found it, Matt. I've heard of a secular Buddhism movement. However, is there a secular Hinduism movement?
No, because it really depends on the person's viewpoint, and Hinduism in general, like you just respect another person's views, whether they're atheist or theist. You can be both in Hinduism. So in general, you would just argue from like a rational argument, like the pramana system that was used in ancient India, where it's similar to steel manning, where you try to understand the theory that the person has and then try to knock it down based on what you think are the holes in their personal theory.
I haven't seen any of that, by the way, from Hindus.
Well, you're basing it off Twitter, where
anywhere.
Okay, that isn't very descriptive, Armin.
Well, I'm just saying a fact. I'm just telling you a fact. I haven't seen.
I've
mostly seen.
Don't have an example.
I have many. No, I'm just saying. There's all the arguments I've seen from Hindus was mostly. It was not steel manning. It's the exact opposite. It's straw manning. They don't, and they're not very tolerant of your ideas if you criticize Hindus.
So what I've seen from XMNA, especially on Twitter, is that they use the stupidest comments from Hindus to generalize a lot of these Hindus as.
All I've seen is stupid comments. So. I haven't seen any good comments.
By the way,
I've seen a purposeful ignoring of critical comments, even from scholarly Hindus.
I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just all that
riots.
Jarin, I'd love to see an example where they have, because you're saying they generalize against all the Hindus. I won't, whatever comments they use, I don't know about. I have never seen ex-Muslims in North America, or actually most ex-Muslims, say anything general against all Hindus. I don't think.
When I see that, okay, so this is not like straw manning or misrepresenting the community. When every time I attack Hinduism, people are like, well, at least we won't behead you. Oh, you're not going to get executed for this. I'm like, what kind of a dumb argument is that? Like, this is not me highlighting the dumbest of the dumbest comments. This is me highlighting the norm.
That is you highlighting the dumbest of the dumbest comments, though.
The dumbest of the dumbest comments is the norm, then.
No, it's not, because I've seen several of these Twitter threads. Like, I've been there with you all looking through these Twitter feeds, and I found intelligent comments that ex-Muslims of North America in particular were always ignoring. So I know for a fact that what you're saying is a lie.
You're saying I'm lying?
Yes. I'm calling you out.
Well, then I know you're full of shit, because I know I'm not lying.
Okay, guys. The thing is, when you have this, what you said, my exception to this is not that what kind of comments they're highlighting, but the idea that you said that they highlight the dumbest of the dumb comments to generalize that this is what the Hindu mindset is. They have never, I don't think they have ever said anything about the Hindu mindset. If they've criticized anything, it's been the Hindutva, Hindu nationalist thing, Hinduism, the religion. Those kinds of things. It's never been a thing about Hindus.
So what I've seen is like you're using the term Hindutva as a boogeyman argument to discriminate against Hindus. And I find that, you always use Hindutva this, Hindutva that. You can't really tell me what this ideology is. You can't tell me what your disagreements are when I ask. You can't tell me what even your position is. You just think it's Hindu nationalist, and nationalist is wrong. That's not supporting a position of secularism or human rights. That's just being anti-national.
It's being anti-nationalist based on one religious community. Yes, that's what it is. It's really as simple as that. To me, that is that basis of it is a problem. So everything, all the other details that come out of it, this obscure law that they did here,
a lot of this, like say you mentioned the Hindu Rashtra, they support Christians and Muslims joining them. Like, for example, the RSS has community support groups for Muslims and Christians to join. It's more just a nationalist Indian movement, just with this basis that, it was founded on Hindu culture, like as a historic fact. So I don't really see how this in particular could be considered bigotry or discrimination against Muslims or Christians in particular. Now, I'm not saying that, say, cow vigilantism, which is a problem, is not bigoted or discriminatory, because that is discrimination, bigotry, so on and so forth. And the people who do that should obviously be punished. But I fail to see why we can't delineate between these two. Like, there seems to be support for secular values in terms of the politicians, whereas maybe some gangs in the streets in some Indian locales are doing heinous things. Okay, that's a police to population problem.
Okay, yeah, I know that you're getting into the details, but it just sounds very familiar to me that this is when a lot of Muslim people come and they say, well, you're speaking up against this thing of Islamophobia. You're talking about criticism of Islam, and you're criticizing jihadism and its political.
I'm not saying criticism.
Hold on. As a cover for your bigotry against Muslims. That's what they say to us. That's what they say to Armin too. And that's kind of what you're saying to us about Hindus. Like, Hindutva is a distinct thing. I grew up in the region. It's a very distinct thing from what we know of most Hindus. It just is. There's an ideology associated with it that is beyond just religious, right?
Guys, we're going to get to the next rest of the patron question.
We're going to. There's only one more.
Okay.
That I was going to read out. Yeah. So Azad is asking, Jarin, what are your criticisms of the BJP? What's your biggest criticism of the BJP government?
Let's see. The economy.
Good question.
Well, the recent example of Yogi Adityanath putting people's private, info, well, not their info, but their facial pictures of them, on a public wall. That would be one criticism.
That's an official BJP position that they wanted to do?
It was insofar as the state of Uttar Pradesh, that was the Uttar Pradesh state government's position, and they were wrong to do that, and the Supreme Court of India knocked it out as unconstitutional.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, I like
the national BJP Narendra Modi position that you disagree
it's not
with?
a Modi position, to the best of my knowledge. But if it is, then he was obviously wrong to do it.
So, what is a BJP/Modi position that you have that you think is wrong, that you disagree with?
Let's see.
While you think about that, I just want to point out, and I might be wrong about this, that I think, like, based on what I've seen, the Supreme Court of India is like way better than way ahead of the positions that by the BJP party. It seems like that's a shining example of like a great thing about India is their Supreme Court, which they have managed to remain secular. And I'm not saying they're without fault. I'm pretty sure you could find examples and stuff. But I really like what the Supreme Court there represents, and I think it's go ahead.
So go ahead. The criticisms of BJP/Modi.
BJP/Modi. Okay, so I guess not getting the UCC passed yet. If that's
the UCC,
the Uniform Civil Code.
Oh, but they're going to, right? That's part of their agenda.
Yeah, hopefully, because then gay marriage can finally become a thing in India.
Okay, so that's eventually something that they're expected to do. But what is a position that they hold? Not a technical thing that hasn't been done yet, or this one province.
Okay, so I guess the economic policy, which is quasi-socialist, because although most people in India seem to support them on the quasi-socialist policy, so I would definitely be.
What is that? Sounds a little vague. Which policy?
Giving, I believe it was government grants for. I believe it was for toilets, to normalize toilets in India.
Wow, I actually like that policy.
Yeah, and it's a great policy, but I would disagree with the socialist leanings. So I guess just the principle.
Providing toilets in a place where most people don't have toilets. We're talking about a position that you disagree with.
You disagree with something that it's a very useful thing they're doing.
A position that
what is the BJP's position on the caste system?
Huh?
On the caste.
They don't agree with the caste system. They don't agree with the caste system.
What are they doing to get rid of it? What are they doing to get rid of this blasphemy law? This thing that Sohan was talking about. What are they doing about? What are some of the things that they're like? They did the triple talaq. They cracked down on a lot of backward Muslim practices. Sure. What have they done? Isn't there something they did to crack down on really backward Hindu practices?
Well, they cracked down on misogyny. They tried to support, supporting daughters.
Disagreement.
Sorry.
Mentioning agreement too.
Yeah, I know. So I would say they're socialist economic policies in general, not specifically the quasi-socialist program that helped with the toilets, but socialist policies in general, because I would prefer capitalist policy.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Here's an easy one. How about here's something that is not ideological at all. What about the time that they shocked the whole nation, but the changing of the money and without any advance?
No, I thought that was really good because it was trying to get rid of dark money. No, the whole point was dark money would be decreased.
Didn't that require a little bit more planning and no?
No, it was terrible planning, and the impact of it was also completely awful. Right. But the policy itself is actually a really good one to tamp down on dark money.
Okay. But the toilet thing was bad because it was socialist.
Well, no, I'm just socialism.
All right, that's good. It's got to be the episode 2 hours and.
All right, guys.
Minutes.
Anyway, he's Sohan. Sorry. Oh my God, I'm so racist. I was about to call you Sohan. Jarin is.
Where can people find Jarin?
His
book. We have to talk about your book. So you have written a book called Faith and Doubt.
I wrote this book. It's against supernatural beliefs in general. I spent 4 years on it, and I mostly intended it for it to be a Kindle book, so you can find it on Amazon. It's much cheaper on Kindle than it is as a physical copy. The physical copy kind of just grew into a textbook size because I kept researching, and I broke the book into part 1 and part 2, where I criticized religion in general in part 1, and then went into religious specifics, history, theology, and so forth in part 2, where I used social psychology, cognitive psychology, and logical fallacies to criticize each specific religion.
Okay, that's so. The book is called Faith and Doubt.
Faith and Doubt. Yeah.
I'm actually going to get it on Kindle probably because it's a big book. So I'll check it out. And
where can people follow you on Twitter? Read your blogs?
My blog is just jarinjove.com. So if you want to follow me, just follow my blog.
JAR.
You can email me at jovejarin@hotmail.com if you like.
Okay, so
dude, you gotta get it.
Ali, can you, for the public version of this podcast, can you send me all the links and all the Twitter and all the emails and put it in the description?
Inshallah, my brother. We will.
Inshallah, we
will conspire against these Hindus and destroy them. Okay. Oh, sorry. Is that going to get a banned on YouTube? No, I hope not.
No.
Okay. So I'll do that. I'm going to send you the links as always. We'll get that. Jarin, thank you for coming on. I know we disagree, and parts of this actually felt bad to me because I feel like there's two of us. And
it's fun. It's fun. I think Jarin, you had fun, didn't you?
I had fun with Ali.
Oh my God. I don't know if that means that I'm. I don't know.
No, I like that. That's funny. Okay, come on. That's good. That's good.
I don't know if that means that I was more generous and good, or whether I'm a pussy. I don't know what it means.
Oh, Susanna saying remind people to like and subscribe. Yeah, the public version of this. If people are listening to this, like and subscribe. And also, Ali, you should have mentioned at the beginning. Wait, what would we do with us, Susanna? At the beginning of the show, you should have mentioned if we reach 500 patrons, we're going to start translating our important episodes into Arabic, Persian, Urdu, and other languages that we don't know which languages, but we're going to decide Arabic first, though. Right? Arabic.
So absolutely, guys.
500 patrons. So and also if you're a patron, you could actually be part of the show. Like you see, we were reading comments from the live chat. The live chat is only with our patrons, so you get to see this video version of it, not just the audio version, and you get to also be part of the show. So yeah, to be a patron.
Right. That's right. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Jarin, for coming into this sort of like Lions.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And remember, the main thing here is that we were trying to, like, the whole intention was to get Jarin to at least say what his point of view was, so that everybody who was listening would go and check out his blog and really read this by Susanna, who's again one of our most popular episodes. She was our guest. According to her, she thought that this was one of the best criticisms of ex-Muslims. And,
I don't know what Susanna is usually smart, so I don't know what she's.
Okay, Armin, this is all right. Over. God.
By the way, I forgot to mention the link. Forgot to mention this. The link to how to become a patron is in the description. Yeah. Forgot to mention.
The link is in the description. So do and she really liked this blog post. It's on her recommendation that I read it, and I'm glad I did. And it's always good to hear criticism and talk about it. So everybody who joined, everybody who asked questions, thank you very much. I thought this was a really fun discussion. So so disagreements aside, thank you for coming on, and we're going to promote all your stuff here on the
we will. Yes, okay. Everything will be, the public version will be in the description, so check it out. Thank you everybody in the live chat. Matt,
stay safe, Jarin. Stay safe. Hope
you both
everything was up for you. Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.